Chapter 1654. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat when he heard the angry reprimand. Do I need to overthink? Isn't it Xue Xue who chased after me? Actually, Xiaohua didn't know what he was thinking about Xue Xue. It would be a lie if he said that he didn't like her. How could Xiaohua not be pleased with such a charming female cultivator who cared about him both openly and secretly? How could he not have other thoughts? But what was worse was that he was thinking about Fairy Hongxia. Their relationship wasn't clear before, so it was still fine. However, at the Feather Immortal gathering, Fairy Hongxia looked back and smiled. Her resolute words directly connected the two of them, who had nothing to do with each other. Xiaohua didn't know how to face Xue Xue. Xiaohua, why aren't you leaving? Zhuo Minghui smiled and said, when you were at the Feather Immortal gathering, Xue Xue came to the Myriad Thunder Valley a few times. Then, she added, the first time, she was almost injured by the silent thunder of the Myriad Thunder Valley. Xiaohua's heart warmed. He bowed and said, I'll leave now. After he finished speaking, he stood up and walked out of the cave quickly. Helplessly, he also stood up and was about to follow out. However, Zhuo Minghui stopped him and said, Why are you going out? I'm going to watch the show. Helplessly, he spread his hands and said innocently, Just watch from here. Zhuo Minghui waved her hand and a 3-foot mirror appeared in midair. The situation outside was reflected in the mirror. Helplessly frowned and said, There's no sound, just watching. It's boring. But do you want to learn more? Zhuo Minghui sneered and said, Are you still thinking about that guy? Helplessly was shocked and quickly waved his hand, Madam, what are you talking about? This is Xiaohua's matter. Why are you implicating me for no reason? Then he pointed at Xiaohua in the mirror and scolded, Xiaohua, that little bastard, how dare he two-time? When he comes back, I'll teach him a lesson. Shut up. Zhuo Minghui coldly humphed. Xue Xue is Martial Uncle Sun Ming's disciple. She has a boundless future in my Imperial Thunder sect, so she's a good match for Xiaohua. As for that Hongxia fairy, she's already a foundation establishment cultivator at such a young age. She's definitely an outstanding disciple of Huanhua sect, Wui. What's even rarer is that she has deep feelings for our Xiaohua. She's also someone this old woman values, so she's a good match for Xiaohua. Madam, why can Xiaohua do it, but this old man can't? He helplessly muttered. But why would Zhuo Minghui care about him? Oh right, there's also that girl Xuanshu. She looks pretty good too, helpless. Meanwhile, Xiaohua had just left the cave and was frowning. He was still pondering how to talk to Xue Xue when suddenly, a sword light flashed in front of his eyes. A flying sword talisman had arrived 3 feet in front of him. Xiaohua was shocked and flew up without thinking. Just as he flew up, he heard Xue Xue angrily rebuke, Xiaohua, you still have the guts to dodge? Xiaohua looked up and saw 2 people standing in midair. One was Xuanshu, who was extremely far away and her expression couldn't be seen clearly. The other was Xue Xue. Her face was flushed red, her eyes were glaring angrily, and her long, shapely eyebrows were vertical. She had a flustered and exasperated appearance. One of her hands was holding a lot of sword talismans, while the other hand was controlling a bright red flying sword, directly stabbing towards Xiaohua's back. Xue Xue, Xiaohua said in a heavy voice. You, without waiting for him to say anything, Xue Xue shouted again, You're really unreasonable. You've obviously been secretly colluding with Hongxia Fairy, so why did you still provoke me? Xue Xue, you're the unreasonable one. Xiaohua was slightly angry when he heard this. He said in his heart, Everything was delivered to me by yourself. I didn't do anything, right? His mouth answered while dodging the flying sword. What part of me is unreasonable? Xue Xue flew forward a bit, and said somewhat miserably, You were originally walking together with Kai Zhuoxia. Although I saw that you were outstanding, I still congratulated the 2 of you in person. But you said it had nothing to do with Kai Zhuoxia. Naturally, I didn't believe it. When Kai Zhuoxia died, I also urged Uncle to let you go. Presumably, you also know that if it wasn't for me, you might not have been able to walk out. What's with all this? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This flying sword chasing behind him was actually nothing to him. Not to mention the suppressing cloud seal, even a fireball talisman would be broken. But looking at Xue Xue's angry appearance, Xiaohua intuitively didn't dare to do so. But since you've left, don't appear in front of me. When you and I are cultivating on our own and seeking our own fate, it's fine if I don't see you. But you just had to enter the Imperial Thunder sect with me. It's fine if you say your cultivation is profound, but you just had to take care of me. You damned bastard, don't you know? For the sake of such a rare opportunity to enter the Imperial Thunder sect, who knows how much dirty and scheming, but you've always been protecting me as I passed the 3 tests. Do you know, if it wasn't for you, how could I enter the Imperial Thunder sect? Do you know how I miss you in my heart? I cultivate hard every day. You know my cultivation is shallow and can't compare to you. In order to catch up to you, I secretly took a pill behind Master's back. If it wasn't for senior sister finding out in time, I almost wouldn't be able to see you again. Do you know? I dragged senior sister and junior sister to the Thunderclap Palace to listen to the teachings. Wasn't it just to see you? Wasn't it because you were in the Thunderclap Palace? I sent so many sound transmission talismans. Although you replied, it was neither cold nor warm. You didn't even tell me where you were. Other than going to the Thunderclap Palace to find you, where else could I go to find you? Do you know? Even though I've only seen you once in the Thunderclap Palace, that one time was enough to leave an unforgettable impression in my heart. It allowed me to see hope. However, at the same time, I also know that your cultivation has increased too quickly. I felt a little disappointed. I thought, if I continue to cultivate like this, I'm afraid there will be a day when I can catch up to you. And you will definitely get further and further away from me. So far away that I can't see your back. So far that you won't be able to see my longing in your eyes. So after I sent you to the Feather Immortal Gathering, I suppressed my longing for you. I suppressed my thoughts and stopped thinking about you. I worked hard to cultivate. I wanted to give you a surprise when you returned from the Feather Immortal Gathering. I wanted you to have a good impression of me, lessen my worries, and increase my luck. But I didn't expect that you actually crushed my dreams before you returned. That trace of luck of mine was mercilessly swept away by you. Since you're like this, why did you let me meet you? Since you're like this, why did you protect me? Since you're like this, why didn't you say anything to me directly? If you said it earlier, why would I be so infatuated? Why would I be so concerned about you? Xue Xue's voice came one after another. Her voice was like a cuckoo crying blood. Every word was like a heavy hammer that struck Xiaohua's heart. That's right. How could I not? Xiaohua was dejected. His flying figure stopped in front of Xue Xue. Seeing the redness on Xue Xue's face gradually disappear and her face gradually turn pale, Xiaohua was moved. But at this moment, the flying sword talisman mercilessly pierced through Xiaohua's shoulder and stabbed into his back. Xiaohua came out of the cave residence helplessly. He didn't use any yellow talisman on himself at all, so the flying sword talisman easily pierced into his flesh. Seeing this, Xue Xue threw away the pile of flying sword talismans in her hand and hurriedly flew to Xiaohua's side. Her right hand also made a seal at the same time, trying to pull out the flying sword from Xiaohua's back in a flurry. But the more she tried, the more chaotic it became. The flying sword seemed to be stuck in Xiaohua's body, not moving at all. Enemy! Xue Xue's tears were flowing out of heartache. She shouted, "Why didn't you dodge? Your cultivation is so high, how could my flying sword hurt you? You only needed to dodge lightly, how could I really hurt you? I just wanted to vent my anger and let you know my thoughts. When you said those words, I also gave up. I also won't." Saying this, Xue Xue raised her hand and took out a medicinal pill from her storage bag. She hurriedly stuffed it into Xiaohua's mouth. Seeing Xiaohua's phoenix eyes like lightning and his eyebrows reaching his temples, her heart was indescribably happy. She hurriedly said, "Humph, I won't not come again. I want to see who really likes you. I don't believe that the pavilion closest to the water gets the moon first. My junior sister can't defeat Hongxia Fairy who is far away in the Washing Flower sect. But looking at Xiao Hua staring at her, Xue Xue's face flushed red. She lowered her head slightly, but then Xue Xue raised her head again and stared straight at Xiao Hua without flinching. The two people's eyes were intertwined like this. After a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua said coldly, "Is it? Didn't you just want me to say something? Fine, I'll tell you now. This is also what I wanted to tell you when I first joined the Imperial Thunder sect. But at that time, I thought that you and I were fellow apprentices. If I said it, I'm afraid that we won't be fellow apprentices anymore. So I didn't dare to say it. Since you're here today, then I can only say it." Xue Xue's face was pale. She slightly retreated half a step. Her hands were tightly clenched. Her joints were slightly white and her entire body was trembling. But even if she was nervous like this, Xue Xue still didn't shrink back. She stiffened her neck and said, "If you want to say it, then say it. But what you said is only what you think, it doesn't represent what I think, and it can't stop what I think. What I said is naturally my own thoughts. As for what you do, I don't care." Xiao Hua sneered and took a step forward. But then he stretched out his arm and hugged Xue Xue's waist. He lowered his head and said gently, "I've always wanted to tell you that I also like you." Saying this, he lowered his head and fiercely kissed Xue Xue's cherry lips. "Ah?" Xue Xue let out a delicate cry. She was caught off guard and was kissed. Xiao Hua's strong aura made her feel dizzy. Following that, a strange feeling came from her lips, causing her limbs to go limp. She fell into Xiao Hua's embrace. Chapter 1655. Motherfucker. Inside the cave, Xiao Hua slapped his thigh helplessly. He wanted to say something, but Zhuo Minghui reached out and wiped away the mirror. She sneered, "What? Do you regret it?" Xiao Hua was stunned. "What do I have to regret? If I regret it, it's because I didn't take in a few more disciples like Xiao Hua. Even martial uncle Sun Ming's disciple. He? I think Sun Shu is better than Xue Xue. Didn't you see Sun Shu's pale face just now? Well, it can't be, right? How many days has it been since Xiao Hua left with Sun Shu? It's just..." Xiao Hua was surprised. "I just looked at Xiao Hua and didn't look at Sun Shu." "Quick, look again." "What are you looking at?" "Sun Shu left." Zhuo Minghui snorted. After a short moment, the yellow light in the air outside the cave dissipated. Xiao Hua pointed his finger and the floating dust was absorbed into the space. He looked at the bashful Xue Xue and said with a smile, "My action was superfluous. Master and Master's wife are both in the late stage of foundation establishment. What can they not see? If you knew, yet you still did that in front of others." Xue Xue's face was red, but she still forced herself to say it. "What? You regret it?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. Xue Xue rolled her eyes and said, "I think it's you who's regretting it, right?" But just as she finished speaking, Xue Xue suddenly remembered and said anxiously, "Oh, I forgot about your wound. Quick, turn around and let me see." "It's not a problem." Xiao Hua turned around with a smile. His brand new Taoist robe was pierced, and the flying sword talisman had turned into a yellow talisman and stuck to his back. There were a few drops of blood on the yellow talisman, which had already dried up. Although a scar could be seen on the tattered Taoist robe, it had already formed a scar. The injury was very light. At this time, Xue Xue simply couldn't think of anything else. She lovingly stroked Xiao Hua's wound and said reproachfully, "You're just showing off. Even if you're in the middle stage of the 12th layer, you still have to dodge. What would I do if it pierced another important place? If I don't get stabbed, won't you always be angry?" Xiao Hua said with a double meaning. "Don't think that you can get away with it just because I stabbed you with my sword. You better tell me everything about Fairy Hong Xia." Xue Xue rebuked. Xiao Hua frowned. Hearing that, Xue Xue's face lit up and she said, "I want to listen carefully and see how you're going to win Fairy Hong Xia's heart. Didn't you hear what the disciples who came back from the Feather Immortal Gathering said? That Fairy Hong Xia is as beautiful as a fairy, and she's even a foundation establishment senior. You're just a chi refining cultivator, yet you're the first to get to her. I'm very curious." Let's wait for the future." Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said, "Fairy Hong Xia? let's talk about this later. I was just casually asking. Shue blinked her eyes and laughed. I just came back and am talking with Master and Master's wife. Do you want to come in? Xiaohua looked at the closed door of the cave and said. Shue quickly waved her hands and said anxiously, No, I just came here 10 days ago. Today, I won't be going. Senior sister and I. When she turned her head to look, Sun Shu was already gone. Xiaohua said loudly, Master, I'll send Shue back to the Thunder Palace. I'll be back in a while. Go. Don't come back. You should hurry up and cultivate. You've gained a lot from the Feather Immortal gathering. You have to comprehend it well. A helpless voice came from the cave. Yes, Master. I'll obey. Xiaohua cupped his hands and bowed. However, he suddenly thought of something and waved his hand. He took out a jade box from the space and the jade box flew into the cave. Xiaohua said, I obtained this during the Feather Immortal gathering. I don't know if it's to your liking, Master. What's this? Xiaohua asked helplessly. However, as soon as he said that, he was pleasantly surprised. Xiaohua could almost see helplessness jumping up from his chair. This, you can even exchange for this thing? Yes, Master. I spent a lot of spirit stones. Xiaohua smiled and pulled his hand. He held Shue's hand and flew out. Along the way, Xiaohua and Shue only held hands. Neither of them spoke much. However, what did words count for at this moment? The warmth in their hands had already tied their hearts together. This feeling was too wonderful for words. After flying for a long time, the two of them finally arrived at the Thunder Palace. However, Shue still felt that they were flying too fast. If possible, she was willing to fly back and forth. This was the first time Xiaohua had come to Sunlei Palace. Seeing the dazzling flowers in the morning light, thousands of trees competing in spring, hundreds of birds competing in the air, Xiaohua couldn't help but praise. Your Sunlei Palace is much stronger than my Jinlei Palace. Shue pursed her lips and laughed. My Thunder Palace is full of clever and skillful female disciples. Of course, it's beautiful. You're a burly male cultivator. Naturally, you can't compare. Soon after, when they were still some distance away from the Thunder Palace, Shue had Xiaohua turn around and said, This concubine's cultivation is still at the 9th layer of qi refining. Everything is still unknown. This concubine is already satisfied to know about Juanxin. Right now, Senior Sister Sun is also hiding this from Master. If she finds out, it won't be good. Xiaohua nodded. He held the soft hand in his hand and said, You can go. We are all cultivators. We are different from ordinary people. You and I are in love with each other. We are looking for an everlasting opportunity. Isn't there a saying? If two people love each other for a long time, why would they be together every day and every night? You and I care about each other. We cultivate together and supervise each other. This is a great joy in cultivation. Wonderful. Shue clapped her hands and said, With a husband like this, what more can a woman ask for? Immediately after, she squeezed Xiaohua's hand and was about to bid farewell, but Xiaohua pulled her back again. Shue's face reddened. Just as she was about to lean forward, she heard Xiaohua say, Right, where is your Thunderstorm Palace's library? Can you take me there? When Shue heard this, she knew she had misunderstood Xiaohua's meaning. The blush on her face deepened. She asked curiously, Why are you going to my Thunder Palace's library? Xiaohua looked around and saw that there was no one around. He hugged Shue and lightly kissed her bright and clean forehead. He said in a low voice, This is a little secret of mine. When there is a chance in the future, I will tell you in detail. Shue was admittedly generous, but being so close to Sunlei Palace and being so intimate with Xiaohua, she was still reserved. She distanced herself from Xiaohua a little and nodded. This concubine naturally believes in my dear Xiao. However, I've already brought you there before. If I bring you there again now, I just feel that it's inappropriate. I'm afraid that other martial sisters will see us. The library is just over there, you can go by yourself. Xiaohua saw that Shue's charming eyes were like silk. Her large eyes were filled with affection. He did not force her. He held her hand and reluctantly bid her farewell. Only after Xue Xue's figure had disappeared did he fly up and fly in the direction Xue Xue had pointed. Dawn was approaching in the east. A golden light was still brewing in the horizon. A pair of red-crowned cranes were flying over from the green hills. Xiaohua's heart relaxed for no reason. There was a kind of indescribable joy. It was as if this world was suddenly not as lonely as it was on the other side. It was as if this picturesque mountain range had suddenly gained a layer of warmth. In this world, there are people who try to deceive each other and fight to the death. But after all, there is also warmth, affection, kinship, and love. Only in this world can there be a place that I, Xiaochen, want to go. Xiaohua's heart was once again filled with determination. But for the things that I can protect in this world, the things that I must protect, I can only do my best to raise my cultivation. The sooner I establish my foundation, the sooner I enter Jindan. Only with great divine power can I have great freedom, can I have great happiness. Thinking about this, Xiaohua could not help but miss Fairy Hongxia. When she returns to Huanhua sect, will she be punished? If Huanhua sect is harmful to her, what should I do? Hey, where did this disciple come from? This place belongs to Sun Lei Palace. Without Sun Lei Palace's permission, all male cultivators of the outer palace are not allowed to enter. Just as Xiaohua was thinking, a delicate rebuke came from the distant sky. Xiaohua hurriedly stopped flying. He raised his head and saw that in the distance, in the clouds, 2 female cultivators of the 11th layer of qi refining were standing in front of a palace. They were looking at him coldly. Junior sisters, I am Xiaohua of Sun Lei Palace. This time, I have come to Sun Lei Palace to read the cultivation methods of the library. I hope you can make an exception. As Xiaohua spoke, he handed over his waist token and sect master's token. Xiaohua. A female cultivator wearing a green robe frowned and said in a low voice, I seem to have heard this name from somewhere. The eyes of the other female cultivator wearing a purple robe lit up. She smiled and said, I know. Did you just return from the Feather Immortal Assembly? Xiaohua was stunned and said inwardly, it can't be. Could it be that all the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect know? Right, I also remember. You are the male disciple of Sun Lei Palace who made that junior sister of Huanhua sect change sides at the last minute. The woman in green also came to a realization and said while slapping her forehead. However, the woman sized Xiaohua up a few times, feeling somewhat baffled. Everyone says Xiaohua has an incomparable temperament, a handsome appearance, and a cultivation base at the peak stage of the aura refining realm, but why are you so unremarkable? Xiaohua smiled bitterly and handed over his token and sect master's token again. He reminded, I have something to do in the library. Junior sisters, please inform me. Library? What right do you have to enter? You are not a disciple of my Sun Lei Palace? The female cultivator in purple said unhappily, I have the sect master's token. You should take it to the teacher on duty to take a look. Xiaohua handed over the sect master's token and waist token to the 2 of them. The 2 of them glanced at each other. The woman in green said, wait a moment. Not long after, an early-stage foundation establishment female cultivator came out from the palace. She glanced at Xiaohua indifferently and said indifferently, follow I? Yes, thank you, Martial Ant. Xiaohua bowed and followed the female cultivator into the palace. The 2 female disciples behind him looked at Xiaohua's tall and thin figure with a puzzled expression. No matter how hard they thought, they could not figure out just what part of Xiaohua was worthy of Fairy Hongxia's admiration. Chapter 1656. Xiaohua followed the female foundation establishment cultivator through the palace gate, then entered a large hall without consulting anyone. Inside the hall, there were many female cultivators dressed in colorful clothes and chattering with each other. Whenever they saw Xiaohua enter, they would point at him curiously. Xiaohua had a warm smile on his face and didn't avoid the gazes of others. His indifferent and rather confident gaze swept across the faces of these women. Just like the Heavenly Thunder Palace, the library pavilion was also inside the large hall. As Xiaohua walked, there were very few female cultivators around him. Occasionally, he would see a few, but they were all foundation establishment cultivators. There were even a few gold core cultivators who walked by indifferently, causing Xiaohua to respectfully avoid them and salute them. After walking for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he actually arrived at a garden. This garden was very large, and it was filled with all kinds of strange spiritual herbs and spiritual trees. In the center of this garden, there was a pond about 10 zhang in diameter. There were ripples of blue water in the pond and it was covered with lotus leaves. In the midst of the dark green, a slender and elegant lotus flower stood in the center of the pond. The female foundation establishment cultivator walked to the edge of the pond and stopped. With a wave of her hand, the sect master's token and Xiaohua's token were both thrown into the lotus flower. Could it be? This lotus flower is the path to the library pavilion? Xiaohua was stunned. This was something he had never thought of before. Sure enough, not long after the two tokens fell into the lotus flower, a fluctuation of spiritual energy flashed. The entire pond's green color began to tremble, then immediately boiled. At the same time the lotus leaves moved up and down, the entire pond also emitted a roaring sound. From where the lotus flower was to where Xiaohua was standing, a thin, bright ripple began to appear. The ripple grew larger and wider, and along with the sound of the pond water, the ripple finally parted the water on both sides of the pond, revealing a passage emitting a faint green light in the pond. Go! The female foundation establishment cultivator pointed with her hand and instructed, "You can only walk in the passage, you can't flying." "Thank you, martial ant, this disciple understands." Xiaohua bowed and walked in. Just as Xiaohua stepped into the passage, he felt a kind of cold air coming from the surrounding pool water. That cold air was extremely heavy, and it actually made people feel as if there was a mountain-like force pressing down from the pool water. Xiaohua believed that if there was anything wrong, just the pressure from the pool water on both sides was enough to crush a foundation establishment or even Jindan cultivator's body into meat paste. This pool of water. I'm afraid it's the so-called innate water essence? A thought passed through Xiaohua's mind. He thought of the water essence that he was looking for. However, he quickly shook his head. How could the Imperial Thunder Sect use it in a formation of the Sun Thunder Palace? Even if it was the array protecting the library. In front of the passage was the lotus flower. The lotus flower was floating on the surface of the water, and beneath the water was a slender root. When Xiaohua arrived in front of it and swept it with his divine sense, he discovered that this root was actually just an illusion, and underneath this illusion was a thin spatial crack. Could it be that the library is in a space? Sure enough, when Xiaohua's figure fell into the crack, there was a rather large space in front of him. The layout of the space was similar to that of the Sun Thunder Palace. There was a small pavilion, and several middle or late foundation establishment cultivators were sitting cross-legged on the left side of the pavilion. Only one early foundation establishment cultivator was holding Xiaohua's command token and sect master's command token, standing not far from Xiaohua with a somewhat peculiar expression. "You're Xiaohua?" That cultivator asked indifferently. "This disciple is?" Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent and hurriedly answered with a salute. "This sect master's command token allows you to go to the libraries of the 8 great thunder palaces. Which ones have you been to?" Alright, martial ant knows. This disciple has been to the Sun Thunder Palace and the Qian Thunder Palace. This Sun Thunder Palace is the 3rd. What are you doing in my Sun Thunder Palace's library? Reporting to martial ant, this disciple wants to find a suitable foundation establishment cultivation method. So simple? Yes, that's all. The sect master's command token has decreed that you can browse any cultivation method or secret book that is 1 realm higher than you. As for what you read, I do not care. You may go. That cultivator returned the command token and the sect master's command token to Xiaohua, then pointed to the pavilion behind him and said, "The flowers inside are divided into 9 petals. The fewer petals there are, the shallower your realm is." "Many thanks, martial ant." Xiaohua cupped his hands in thanks, then walked into the pavilion without consulting anyone. Sure enough, the interior of the pavilion looked like a garden. However, there was only one huge flower and tree. On top of that flower and tree, There were several graceful flowers. Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense and found flowers with only one petal and two petals. These two flowers most likely contain qi refining and foundation establishment cultivation methods and secret books. Xiaohua walked in front of one of the flowers and looked at it with rapt attention. Sure enough, there were strong fluctuations of spiritual power between the stamens. Xiaohua was secretly delighted. He flew up, and his entire body became smaller and smaller. Finally, he turned into the size of a bee and disappeared into the stamen. A month later, Xiaohua came out of the pavilion with a tired face. The disciple on duty only scanned Xiaohua with his divine sense, then ignored him. Xiaohua cupped his hands towards that disciple, then left through the crack he came in from. This time, he didn't leave through the original passage, but directly flew out from the lotus flower. Soon after, Xiaohua walked from the garden to the main hall. Following his memory, he found the way from the main hall and left Xuanlei Palace, then flew back to Eastern Ridge. After returning to Eastern Ridge, Xiaohua opened the sealed formation. He didn't have time to check anything, so he only activated the heavenly fire formation. He sat down on the cloud bed in the cave and carefully recalled the cultivation methods he saw in Xuanlei Palace. While memorizing, he also took out a jade slip and recorded his own understanding inside. After another 10 days of bitter cultivation, Xiaohua finally opened his eyes. His pair of eyes once again stared blankly at the entrance of the immortal's cave. After a long while, his eyes finally regained their luster. Xiaohua could only hear him talking to himself. Strange, how come this foundation establishment cultivation technique is different from aura refining cultivation technique? The qi refining cultivation method has the same meridians, but the foundation establishment cultivation method seems to have several different meridians. Although there aren't many, they are still different. If only I could use my divine sense to duplicate them. Xiaohua sighed with emotion. He carefully put away the jade slip that recorded his own understanding. However, he didn't dare to do anything in the library. Since Tai Ching Sec's illusory formation could leave behind images, presumably the library's formation also had the same effect. There was no need for him to try to be clever and end up with a blunder. Since it's the same meridians, the difference in tempering true essence between different cultivation methods can be seen at a glance. However, there's no way to compare the different meridians. Xiaohua thought to himself. It's really difficult to find a suitable cultivation method among the many cultivation methods. Alas, no wonder the sect master reminded me when he gave me the token. Soon after, Xiaohua stood up and flew into the herb garden. He spread out his divine sense and walked to several different places. He had secretly placed warning talismans in those places. At this time, it seemed that there were no abnormalities. No one had used the lost token to enter Eastern Ridge's herb garden. I'm afraid I'm thinking too much, Xiaohua thought. He took care of the weeds and other things in the herb garden. Then he used a technique to draw in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and poured it into the herb garden. Only then did he return to his immortal's cave. As before, he took the soul-gathering pill and calmly cultivated. To the left of Thunderquake Palace, in a scarlet mountain range, there was a deep and serene passage. At the end of the passage was a brightly lit hall. More than a dozen cultivators were leisurely sitting. In front of these cultivators was a small jade table. On the table were several plates of spirit fruits and a jug of wine. The jug wasn't large and seemed to be able to be drunk in 1 or 2 mouthfuls. In the hands of each cultivator was a jade cup. The jade cup was filled with dark green spirit wine. The spirit wine's fragrance assailed the nostrils. These cultivators were sitting in a circle. In the circle, there was a large open space. In the open space, there were several graceful and flirtatious women. They were dancing lightly and gracefully. The entire hall was filled with pleasant music. It was unknown where it came from, but the dancing women's waists were really alluring. The cultivators were none other than Zhen Qikue of Thunderquake Palace's Yanlei Ridge. At this time, Zhen Qikue's face was red and his eyes were slightly red. He looked around at the cultivators and raised his cup. Senior Marshall Brothers, this little brother is not talented. Here's a toast to you all. Hee hee, Junior Marshall Brother, Although the name of your spring flower wine is vulgar, the taste is excellent. It's a rare spirit wine in our country of Shi. This kind of spirit wine should be slowly tasted. It's somewhat indecent for you to raise your cup again and again like this. An early-stage foundation establishment cultivator smiled and raised his cup. As he spoke, he drank his cup like the other cultivators. Zhen Chikue drank the wine and filled his cup from the small wine pot. He said, "Look at what 17th Senior Marshall brother said. Our Yen Lei Ridge brothers are as close as brothers. This little brother accidentally got such a good wine. Isn't it to share it with you all? I still have some spring flower wine. When you all leave, I'll give each of you a pot." Ha, straightforward. 17th Senior Marshall brother raised his cup and smiled. Junior Marshall brother has always been so straightforward. Otherwise, I would have thought that you had something to do. Come, let's toast to Junior Marshall brother. Zhen Chikue smiled and drank his cup. But then he put the cup on the table and sighed. 17th Senior Marshall brother, you're wrong. I do have something to do. Junior Marshall brother, just say it. We're all foundation establishment cultivators. There are few things in the Thunderquake sect that we can't do. What else can it be? It's just that I couldn't go to the Feather Immortal Assembly. Seeing others show off at the Feather Immortal Assembly and win the favor of the fairy, I really can't get over it. Zhen Chikue said with a gloomy face. You can leave now. Zhen Weisheng, who was sitting in the middle, heard this and frowned. He waved his hand and said to the women in the middle, "Yes." The women stopped dancing, bowed, and left with smiles on their faces. 4th Senior Marshall brother, why did you ask them to leave? 17th Senior Marshall brother asked curiously. Zhen, how can you be so careless? Didn't Junior Marshall brother say it already? This is about the disciples of the Feather Immortal Assembly and the disciple called Xiaohua. The fewer people, the better. Zhen Weisheng said with a smile. Xiaohua? The disciple who will participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly? Is he very famous? 17th Senior Marshall brother Zhen Hao asked curiously. Chapter 1657. Zhen Weisheng sneered and said, "Of course we don't know. However, among the aura refining disciples, his reputation is surprisingly good. He's surprisingly famous." Why is a Qi refining disciple so famous? Is it because of the Feather Immortal Assembly? Zhen Meng was amused. He had never heard of a Qi refining disciple becoming famous because of the Feather Immortal Assembly, even if someone had won first place. Let Junior brother tell you about it. Zhen Weisheng said as he looked at the other disciples who were also surprised. Zhen Chikue sneered, "What is there to say? Isn't it because he took away my qualification to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly? A disciple of the Myriad Thunder Valley dares to touch the whiskers of the tiger of Swallow Thunder Ridge. This guy took away our qualification to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly?" A disciple sneered. Back then, Xiang Yang humiliated our Swallow Thunder Ridge. Now there is Xiaohua. Hee, if we don't do anything, the other disciples will think that we are afraid of the Myriad Thunder Valley. 11th brother. Zhen Weisheng scolded. Xiaohua is in the limelight now. Many foundation establishment disciples are also paying attention to him. Moreover, I heard that Marshal Uncle Zhen Qing has a good impression of him. If we do anything, we will cause trouble. Marshal Uncle Zhen Qing is from the Thunder Palace. How can he interfere with the internal affairs of the Thunder Palace? 11th brother defended himself. Zhen Chikue sneered, "What good impression? Isn't it because of Xiaohua's hypocrisy? I have asked around. According to Wang Yunxiao, this guy offended the Changbai sect during the Feather Immortal Assembly. He took a lot of their elixirs and was chased after by them. It doesn't matter if they beat him, but the other disciples were also involved. He even pretended to leave the Thunderboat." Humph, what do you mean by leaving? To put it bluntly, he abandoned the other disciples and ran away alone. How can such a person be favored by Marshal Uncle Zhen Qing? In short, during this period of time, don't do anything else. Zhen Wei warned, even if you want to vent your anger, wait until later. Hearing Zhen Weisheng's warning and seeing Zhen Chikue's anger, everyone was even more surprised. They put down their wine glasses and urged Zhen Qikue to tell them what had happened. Zhen Qikue had no choice but to grit his teeth and tell them what had happened at the Feather Immortal gathering. Although he had only heard it from Wang Yunxiao, he felt that what Xiaohua had done should be what he had done. All of Xiaohua's achievements should be his achievements. Even Fairy Hong Xia's smile should be directed at him. Xiaohua, who was far away in the eastern mountain range, didn't know that someone was actually thinking about him. While he was taking medicinal pills to cultivate, he also took out the soul-absorbing bells booklet and took the time to refine the soul-absorbing bell. After all, Jingshan's attack and defense were too weak. In his hands, it could only be made into an ordinary celestial device. The cloud-suppressing seal was too strong and consumed a lot of Dharma power. There was also the Devil Hammer, which was his trump card. Unless he was in a life-or-death situation, he couldn't use it. As for the Prajna Heavy Sword and the Tong Tian Staff Technique, Xiaohua didn't know what they were used for. After all, cultivators only used spells or celestial devices when fighting. Since he could get close to his opponent, the Devil Hammer could solve the problem. What was the use of the 360 moves of the staff technique? Another half a year passed quickly. It seemed that Xiaohua had a deeper understanding of cultivation because he had witnessed the foundation building of 2 qi refining cultivators at the Feather Immortal gathering. His cultivation speed was obviously much faster than before. In just half a year, he was about to step into the late stage of the 12th level of qi refining. Moreover, in this half a year, Xiaohua had read all the books in the other Thunder Palaces. There was only one Thunder Palace that he hadn't visited yet. In his opinion, Thunder Palace only accepted young female disciples, so the cultivation techniques inside it probably couldn't compare to those of the other Thunder Palaces. He would just have to wait until he reached the foundation establishment stage to take a look. On this day, Xiaohua was cultivating with his eyes closed. All of a sudden, Xiaohua felt that he couldn't move his limbs at all, and his entire mind was abnormally active. It was as if he only had this thought, and everything else was nothingness. Xiaohua was shocked. A kind of loneliness that he had never felt before grew and spread from his thoughts, gradually annihilating them. It couldn't be said to be dark, nor could it be said to be light. Xiaohua only felt that he, or perhaps his thoughts, were in an isolated space. In this space, Xiaohua's thoughts were as fast as light. He only had to think a little, and the darkness around his thoughts surged back like an avalanche. He clearly knew that this was darkness, but he also knew that he was moving. What's going on? Xiaohua was on guard. He couldn't bear the incomparable loneliness. He hurriedly tried to send his mind into the space to call out Little Yellow or Little Silver. However, no matter what, he couldn't sense where the space was. It was as if he was the only thing in this endless darkness. This is bad. As soon as this thought appeared in Xiaohua's mind, an indescribable sense of desperation and death filled the entire space. This sense of desperation and death seemed to originate from the space, and also from Xiaohua's thoughts. In short, Xiaohua felt that he had lost the meaning of his existence. As long as he lived in this world, he would become the butt of other people's jokes, the object of their ridicule. In an instant, the faces of Yun Jiechong, Wang Yunxiao, Kun Fian, Qian Diheng and the other disciples flashed before his eyes. How can an itinerant cultivator fight with us without any foundation? There are 3,000 great Daos, and even if we occupy 2,999 of them, that great Dao is definitely not yours. What's the point of you living? Why don't you immortalize earlier and reincarnate into a good backer? Xiaohua felt himself break out in a cold sweat. He knew that these things were meaningless, but he still roared hysterically, I may be an itinerant cultivator, but I also cultivate hard and work hard. Why can't I have the achievements that you all have? You all want me to die, but what are you all waiting for? Why don't you all die? Even if I'm going to die, I still want to kill all of you one by one. You want to kill all of us? The faces of the disciples suddenly disappeared. In the dark space, the faces of Fairy Hong Xia and Xue Xue flashed again. Fairy Hong Xia said mournfully, if you want to kill all of us, we won't fight back, because we all love you. Since you've made up your mind, this concubine will obey. Darling Xiao, My sister's thoughts are my thoughts. This concubine will also obey your wishes. Shui Shui's eyes were filled with tears. Xiaohua seemed to have gone crazy. His entire mind shook for no reason, and a wave of sadness came from his thoughts. Don't worry, even if I have the ability to kill all of you, I will definitely not make a move against you all. If I make a move against all of you, I will first kill myself. Is that so? Xiaohua, if that's the case, why don't you make a move? Zhang Zhihao, Yong Shang, Fan Daomao, and even Xiao Yuehong and Gong Mingwei's faces appeared. What's the meaning of your life? Cultivation, endless cultivation. In the end, won't your body still turn into a pile of dust? Even if you have endless divine powers, isn't there someone more divine than you? They can kill you with a wave of their hand. What's the meaning of your 100 years, 1,000 years of cultivation? Master? Eldest senior brother? Xiaohua's tears fell. This disciple is useless. I know that 100 Herbs Gate is the culprit, but after so many years, I still can't do as I wish. Even senior sister is still bitterly holding on in 100 Herbs Gate. But since you can't do as you wish, then there's no need to do it. Master has never blamed you, Xiao Yuehong said with a smile. You should hurry up and come over. Master misses you very much. Your eldest senior brother and second senior brother also miss you very much. Is that so? Xiaohua was a little confused. Yes, it's very important. You only need to hit your own forehead with one hand, and all of your troubles will disappear. All of your worries will disappear. All of your teasing will disappear. Gong Mingwei said with a smile. It's that simple? It's that simple. Ha! Suddenly, Xiaohua let out a long howl. His thoughts spun rapidly, and he actually set off a boundless spatial storm. Countless dark colors and innumerable faces were sucked into it. A faint human figure appeared in the space. The figure pointed one hand to the sky and the other to the earth. It was Xiaohua's image. I only cultivate based on my heart. Whether it's love or hate, it's also my nature. Whether it's the 3,000 great Daos or the 30,000 great Daos, what does it have to do with me? I'm only cultivating for myself. I'm only working hard for this life. No matter what the result is, no matter how difficult the process is, I only have a clear conscience. I'm only worthy of the heavens, I'm only worthy of the earth, I'm only worthy of this life as a human. Whether it's life or death, what does it have to do with me now? I have a place to come from when I was born, and a place to go when I die. Why should I think about it now? Wait for the inner demons to return to their respective places. Don't disturb this young master anymore. Otherwise, whether it's immortals or Buddhas, I'll kill them all. An indifferent aura and an indomitable momentum instantly engulfed the entire space. At the same time, an extremely brilliant brilliance was born from the space. Xiaohua suddenly felt that he could move. His thoughts were pulled out of the space. When he opened his eyes, what he saw was a ray of newly born sunlight outside the cave. Inner demons? That was close. Xiaohua suddenly woke up. He touched his face, which was covered in sweat. He looked at his Taoist robe, which was completely soaked in sweat as if it was fished out of water. Just when Xiaohua's thoughts were pulled out of the space, within the Buddha's heart, the Buddha's fire formed by the Buddha's light suddenly trembled. Then, it flickered 9 times and there were no more changes. Helplessness was right. The cloud-suppressing seal had been tempered by the Buddha's fire in the Buddha's compassionate heart, so it had an unbreakable imprisoning power. Xiaohua's Buddha's light, which was formed by killing people and saving people, was the foundation of the karmic fire. Xiaohua originally had the dragon bloodline and the phoenix body, so cultivating Taoism shouldn't cause inner demons to appear. However, he had condensed the Buddha's relic. Furthermore, the Buddha's relic gave birth to a compassionate heart and endless karmic fire. This kind of Taoism involved reincarnation and karmic hindrances, which brought endless variables to his cultivation. Chapter 1658. Late stage of the 12th layer of qi refining. Xiaohua checked his cultivation and was slightly surprised. According to his previous progress, he would have to wait for another 1 or 2 months. But thinking about the thrilling experience just now and the experience he had never experienced before, Xiaohua still had a trace of lingering fear in his heart. He really couldn't imagine what kind of situation he would have fallen to if he hadn't made a prompt decision at that time and resolutely shouted the oath of meet God, kill God, meet Buddha, kill Buddha. Sure enough, the greater the effort, the greater the harvest. Xiaohua thought to himself, but this kind of inner demon is too insidious. I've cultivated for many years and never encountered it, but I actually encountered it last night. Dark night is indeed the weakest time for cultivators. Even in the dark night, cultivators can see as if it's daytime. Just as Xiaohua was sighing with emotion, he felt that the spell formation of the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden was activated. He picked up the token and opened the spell formation. A red sound transmission talisman flew in. When Xiaohua crushed it, a familiar voice came from it. Congratulations on returning from the Feather Immortal Gathering, little junior brother. Ha, big senior brother has come out of seclusion. Xiaohua somersaulted in the air and said with a smile. Then, without hesitation, he closed the spell formation and used the hibernating thunder escape to fly in the direction of the myriad Thunder Valley. When his figure disappeared, in the distant sky, behind the white clouds, a ripple of space flashed and a cultivator wearing a camouflage robe appeared. He whispered in surprise, "This little cultivator actually knows the thunder escape technique? That's really rare." Then, the camouflage cultivator looked at the spell formation of the Eastern Ridge and flew in another direction. Surprisingly, he also used the hibernating thunder escape technique. Haha, big senior brother, congratulations on coming out of seclusion. Before Xiaohua arrived, he felt a few divine senses sweep over and shouted loudly. Ha, it's all thanks to little junior brother. I have to thank little junior brother. Xiang Yang flew into the air. He was at the middle stage of foundation establishment. Xiaohua had a smile on his face. This is eldest senior brother's good fortune. It has nothing to do with this little brother. The heavens are just borrowing this little brother's hand to give that thing to eldest senior brother. Xiaohua followed Xiang Yang into the cave. After greeting his master and master's wife, they took their seats. Xiang Yang said, I've already heard about junior brother's performance at the Feather Immortal Conference. Today, seeing that junior brother has already reached the late stage of the 12th layer of Qi refining, I'm sure you've gained a lot at the Feather Immortal Conference. I'm really happy for junior brother. Foundation establishment is just around the corner. Xiaohua said seriously, before I went to the Feather Immortal Assembly, I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I thought that once I had enough magic power, building my foundation would be a piece of cake. However, after I went to the Feather Immortal Assembly, I realized that building my foundation was far more difficult than I thought. In the entire Feather Immortal Assembly, there were more than 200 cultivators in the late stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refining realm, but there were only a dozen or so who built their foundation. Building your foundation really depends on fate. Here you go. Xiang Yang, who had been silent all this time, glanced at Xiaohua helplessly. He raised his hand and a jade slip flew to Xiaohua. This is... Xiaohua took it and looked at it with his divine sense. He raised his head and said, Master, this is a cultivation technique? Yes. Do you still remember the embryonic breathing pill you gave me before you left? I exchanged it with that thing. Xiang Yang waved his hand helplessly, as if he had done something extremely insignificant. Master, a embryonic breathing pill actually exchanged for a foundation establishment cultivation technique. This transaction is really good, Xiaohua said with a smile. He was naturally very grateful in his heart. Isn't it because he owes me a favor? That person urgently needs this embryonic breathing pill, so he took out this cultivation technique. Xiang Yang rolled his eyes at Xiaohua helplessly. Do you think it's easy to get a foundation establishment cultivation technique? Then he asked again, you must have also gone to the 8 Great Lightning Palaces library during this time. Did you see any suitable cultivation techniques? Master, apart from exchanged Thunder Palace, I went to the other lightning palaces. I saw many cultivation techniques and memorized many of them. However, I felt that there was a suitable one. I still haven't. Xiao Hua said with a smile. And don't go to Exchanged Thunder Palace. A group of young female cultivators cultivate there. I'm afraid there aren't any good cultivation techniques. Master has seen this cultivation technique before. It's a high-grade fire attribute cultivation technique. It's the most reliable. After you reach foundation establishment, you should cultivate this one. Furious Flame Arts. Perhaps it's really suitable for disciples' concealed flame body. Xiao Hua smiled and stored the jade slip into his space. Xiao Hua, where Shui Shui? Yan Qinglian said with a smile. I heard Master's wife say that after you left, she came a few times. Senior sister-in-law seems, you haven't seen her yet? Presumably, Zhuo Minghui had already told Yan Qinglian about this matter. Xiao Hua's face flushed. Senior sister-in-law, if I don't reach foundation establishment and Shui Shuerhua doesn't reach foundation establishment, everything is nonsense. Good. Helplessly, he clapped his hands. This old man also wanted to remind you a bit. This place where the soul of a beauty disappears is the grave of a hero. In the past, cultivation was the most important thing. I didn't expect you to have such awareness. It's worthy of celebration. Zhuo Minghui and Yan Qinglian's faces were both slightly red. Subsequently, everyone changed the topic. Xiao Hua toasted his master and master's wife several cups of wine, then toasted Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian several more cups of wine. Only then did he follow Xiang Yang into their immortal's cave. After waiting for Xiao Hua to sit properly, Xiang Yang tidied up his clothes and walked in front of Xiao Hua. He cupped his hands and said, Junior Martial Brother, you and I are martial brothers. However, this time, the thing that Junior Martial Brother gave Senior Martial Brother is really too precious. The help it gave Senior Martial Brother is really too great. Senior Martial Brother doesn't have anything to repay. Senior Martial Brother. Seeing this, Xiao Hua promptly got up and raised his hand to support his slightly slow-witted Senior Martial Brother. He angrily said, Senior Martial Brother, what are you doing? If Junior Martial Brother has something to give to Master and you, who else can I give it to? At the side, Yan Qinglian pursed her lips and said with a smile, Naturally, I can also give it to Master's wife and Senior Martial Sister. He, of course, Master's wife and Senior Martial Sister actually forgot. Xiao Hua said with a smile, Senior Martial Brother, look, even Senior Martial Sister knows. Why are you treating me like an outsider? If you salute me like this, wouldn't it damage Junior Martial Brother's Dao heart? And I won't be able to reach foundation establishment again? Xiang Yang circulated his magic power and insisted on kneeling. However, after kneeling a few times, he still didn't succeed. He also knew that Xiao Hua's arm strength was very great and far from what he could match. He could only get up and say, then Senior Martial Brother is ashamed to accept it. No, Senior Martial Brother, Junior Martial Brother still has something to ask Senior Martial Brother for help with. As he spoke, Xiao Hua took out the Tai green light rod and the jade slip. When Xiang Yang heard that there was something he could help with, his face was overjoyed. He said, what do you need me for? Do you want me to refine this magic tool again? Oh no. Xiao Hua promptly waved his hand and said, Senior Martial Brother, you only need to follow the method on this jade slip and take out the Tai green light from this magic tool. Tai green light? Not only was Xiang Yang stunned, Yan Qinglian was also stunned. She asked curiously, what do you want this Tai green light for? Yan Qinglian rolled her eyes a few times and said with a smile, I'm afraid it has nothing to do with cultivation. Xiao Hua scratched his head and said, Senior Martial Brother and Senior Martial Sister, don't ask about this. If it had anything to do with cultivation, Junior Martial Brother would have already gone to find Master. Xiang Yang took the jade slip and said, Senior Martial Brother also doesn't know if helping you like this is right or wrong. Don't worry, Senior Martial Brother, Junior Martial Brother has a plan in mind. Xiao Hua smiled and took out the corpse and blood of the lizard beast. He said to Yan Qinglian, Senior Martial Sister, Junior Martial Brother's luck is pretty good. I actually encountered a lizard beast. How about we each take half of this fur and blood? It's really a lizard beast? Yan Qinglian's face turned pale. Although this spirit beast's strength is only at the chi refinement stage, it's good at hiding and seems to know an escape technique. Even the escape technique of the 5 elements can't catch up to it. How did Junior Marshall Brother catch it? When Junior Marshall Brother saw it, this lizard beast seemed to have already been injured by someone. The person chasing it wasn't nearby, so Junior Marshall Brother took advantage of it for nothing. But Yan Qinglian nodded and took the lizard beast. She seemed to be quite skilled in separating the fur and flesh. Then, she used a technique to collect the blood into 2 jade bottles. Afterwards, she gave half of the fur and a jade bottle to Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Junior Marshall Brother, could it be that you also want to refine talismans?" Junior Marshall Sister, Junior Marshall Brother indeed has this idea. However, Junior Marshall Brother is afraid that Master will say that I don't do proper work. Xiaohua nodded and said, You already have the method to refine an invisibility talisman. Although the method to deal with the fur is low level, it is still essential. Wait a moment, Senior Marshall Sister will make a copy for you. Xiaohua took the things and said with a smile, "Many thanks, Senior Marshall Sister." When Yan Qinglian handed the copied jade slip to Xiaohua, Xiang Yang at the side also finished reading the jade slip. He slightly shook his head and said, "This Tai Azure light extraction method is quite marvelous. If it wasn't for Senior Marshall Brothers' cultivation base being in the middle stage of foundation establishment and greatly improved, it would really be somewhat troublesome to extract it." As he said this, he urged the magic power in his hand, and several complicated techniques hit the Tai Azure light rod. When the Tai Azure light rod emitted a faint azure light, Xiang Yang shouted loudly, "Absorb!" Xiang Yang's right hand grabbed at the Tai Azure light rod floating in the air, and a bucket-sized azure light slightly flowed out of the rod. As soon as the azure light appeared in the air, an extremely sharp feeling pierced everyone's eyes and skin. "Great!" Xiaohua sighed inwardly. This innate golden energy is the best for refining flying swords. Xiaohua took the Tai Azure light from Xiang Yang's hand, opened his mouth, and cultivated the Tai Azure light into his mouth. Then he moved it to the Buddha's Saraira outside his Naiwan palace and placed it together with the Buddha's fire, enveloping the 9 sword orbs. They were only nourished by the Tai Azure light at all times and refined by the limitless karmic fire. He didn't know when these 9 sword orbs would be able to nurture sword spirits, and he also didn't know how earth-shattering the power of the flying swords refined by the limitless karmic fire would be. Next to the 9 sword orbs, the shabby small bucket was also floating obliquely, and the limitless karmic fire was also refining it brilliantly. Staying in Xiang Yang's cave, the 3 of them chatted for a while about the Feather Immortal Assembly. Xiaohua also asked some questions about cultivation, especially about inner demons, and how to avoid chi deviation. Only then did he bid farewell to Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian, flying back to the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. Chapter 1659. She had no choice but to give Xiaohua the art of wrath was indeed a first-rate cultivation method. Among the foundation establishment cultivation methods Xiaohua had seen in the 7 lightning palaces, although it wasn't in the top 10, it was definitely in the top 20. Moreover, the meridians cultivated by the art of wrath were obviously a bit more than other cultivation methods. If he could use it to build his foundation, his magic power would definitely be a bit stronger than others of the same level. Alas, Master is really considerate. Xiaohua sighed with emotion as he put the art of wrath into his space. Another month passed, and Xiaohua's realm steadily increased. However, Xiaohua's heart was somewhat impetuous. After all, he was a disciple who had been to the Feather Immortal Assembly. He had seen hundreds of disciples who were stuck in the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm and couldn't step into the foundation establishment realm. Xiaohua was faintly afraid that he would also reach the end of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm and couldn't take another step forward. This fear was without reason. Xiaohua also knew in his heart, but he just couldn't get rid of it. Perhaps it's an inner demon. Xiaohua thought of his previous experience, so he simply stopped cultivating and took out the lizard's fur and blood. He carefully processed them according to the jade slip that Yan Qinglian gave him. Then he took out the refining method that matched the invisibility talisman that was given to him. He carefully studied it and then slowly refined it. The refining of this talisman was naturally much more difficult than the yellow talisman. The drawing of the talisman, the introduction of spiritual energy, and the formation of the talisman were all abnormally complicated. It was far from what Xiaohua had thought before. Therefore, Xiaohua spent dozens of days pondering how to refine the invisibility talisman while cultivating the Buddha's Saraira. In these dozens of days, the invisibility talisman was finally refined successfully, and the Buddha's Saraira also had a bit of progress. In particular, Xiaohua's realm was still slowly increasing. Although it wasn't as obvious as before when he deliberately cultivated, it still made Xiaohua's heart quite at ease. The invisibility talisman Xiaohua refined was similar to the one he got from Kai Yuxia. It could only conceal oneself without using magic power. As long as magic power was activated, one's body would immediately be exposed. Nothing in this world is perfect. Xiaohua looked at the sparkling invisibility talisman in his hand and sighed inwardly. After putting away the invisibility talisman, Xiaohua had some thoughts again. He had already been to 7 of the 8 Great Thunder Palace's library pavilions. Only the converted Thunder Palace's library had yet to be visited. Although he had helplessly said that he didn't need to go, Xiaohua still felt unsatisfied in his heart. Forget it, I'll go take a look. Otherwise, I'll regret it later. Thinking of this, Xiaohua opened the array formation and used the hibernating thunder escape to head towards the converted Thunder Palace. Naturally, converging Thunder Palace was as heavily guarded as Sun Thunder Palace. Before he could even get close, a beautiful female cultivator around 15 or 16 years old blocked his path. Hey, where did this brat come from? Why are you here at my converging Thunder Palace instead of staying in Gen Thunder Palace? Xiaohua. When that female cultivator saw Xiaohua's face, she actually called out his name. Xiaohua himself was also stunned. He looked up and down at that female cultivator. She was only in the 8th or 9th layer of the aura refining realm. It seemed that he had never seen her before. Could it be that my name has actually spread to converted Thunder Palace? In an instant, Xiaohua's little tail stuck up high. This junior martial sister. Xiaohua smiled and said, Junior martial sister's appearance seems somewhat unfamiliar to me. How did you recognize me? That female cultivator covered her mouth and laughed. You naturally can't recognize me, but I just happen to recognize you. Xiaohua scratched his head, looking somewhat shy. Could it be that brother's reputation in the Imperial Thunder sect is so great? That female cultivator laughed out loud. She actually used her hand to cover her face and laughed. Senior Martial Brother Zhao's skin is really thick. I'm afraid that even Fairy Hong Xia can't stand it. Soon after, she saluted and said, I am Dui Ling. Could it be that Senior Martial Brother Xiao has already forgotten? Dui Ling? Xiaohua was stunned. After thinking for a moment, he slapped his forehead and said, Io, so it's Junior Martial Sister Dui Ling. After not seeing you for so many years, you've indeed become more and more beautiful. It's natural that Brother Xiao couldn't recognize you. Senior Martial Brother Xiao has such a sweet mouth. Dui Ling smiled and said, When Senior Martial Brother Xiao entered the sect that day, I didn't know so much. I've made Senior Martial Brother Xiao go through so much trouble. I've always wanted to find an opportunity to apologize. A few days ago, when I heard that Senior Martial Brother Xiao shocked the Feather Immortal Gathering, I was secretly delighted. After all, I was the one who chose Senior Martial Brother Xiao. I also contributed imperceptibly. This young girl was naturally the girl who took the first test of physical attributes when Xiaohua entered the Imperial Thunder sect. She was only 11 or 12 years old back then, but she had already grown up in the past few years. Junior Martial Sister Dui Ling is right. If not for Junior Martial Sister's discerning eyes, how could Brother Xiao enter the Imperial Thunder sect? Xiaohua naturally said with a smile. Oh right, I wonder what Brother Xiao is doing at my Dui Thunder Palace? It's my turn to be on duty today. Senior Martial Brother Xiao, please explain. Dui Ling smiled and asked with a serious expression. Brother Shao has something to do at the Imperial Thunder Palace's library. Here is the sect master's token as proof. Junior Martial Sister, please lead the way. Xiao Hua said and handed over the sect master's token. Dui Ling didn't have divine perception and naturally couldn't see the contents of the token. Seeing that it was undoubtedly the sect master's token, he smiled and said, Senior Martial Brother Xiao, please follow me. As he spoke, he flew forward, and Xiao Hua followed beside him. Along the way, Dui Ling was very curious and asked many questions about the Feather Immortal Gathering, especially about Fairy Hong Xia's cultivation and appearance. It was obvious that he was eager to compete with her. It wasn't until he saw red bricks and green tiles covered by green bamboos and a female cultivator around the 11th level of Qi refinement that Xiao Hua bid farewell to Dui Ling while sweating profusely. He was secretly criticizing in his heart, why are all the women in the world the same? Dui Ling is an outstanding disciple of the Imperial Thunder Palace, but he can't be free from vulgarity. Why does he always feel that he's not inferior to others? Let's not talk about appearance first. Just the difference in cultivation isn't just a little bit. What's there to compare? The library of the Imperial Thunder Palace was different. It was actually the same as the library of the secular world. The books were placed in different academies according to the cultivation level. Xiao Hua used the sect master's token to enter the academy where the foundation establishment cultivation techniques were kept. In the previous 10 days, Xiao Hua hurriedly flipped through many cultivation techniques. Just as Dui Ling said, there weren't many high-grade cultivation techniques. Most of them were extremely ordinary cultivation techniques. On this day, Xiao Hua picked up a jade slip from a row of tables according to the order. He casually sat cross-legged and immersed his divine perception into it. He roughly read through it. This was still a low-grade foundation establishment cultivation technique. The more Xiao Hua read, the more he read. When he reached the end, he sighed and withdrew his divine perception. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. His entire body shook violently, and an incredulous expression appeared on his face. He hurriedly immersed his divine perception into the last part of the cultivation technique. This? Xiao Hua looked at it several more times. This cultivation method was indeed not rare, but what was strange was that it tempered the meridians. The majority of these meridians were the same as other foundation establishment cultivation methods, but the last part was different from the others. And this last part was what shocked Xiao Hua the most. Because, according to Xiao Hua's understanding of the meridians, this part was connected to the last part of the Heavenly Laws embodiment technique. In other words, if the meridians of this cultivation technique were connected to the Heavenly Laws embodiment technique, besides the sealed meridians of the Qi condensation realm, there would be another meridian circulation. Moreover, these two circulation meridians were connected. Of course, this connection wasn't obvious. If it weren't for Xiao Hua's familiarity with meridians, he wouldn't have noticed it. Sure enough, I felt that there were meridians after the Qi condensation realm. I really saw it here. Xiao Hua couldn't help but think of the question he previously asked Dui Ling Tian. However, he immediately smiled bitterly. Even if he knew, what use would it be? Could it be that he really had to stop foundation establishment and continue cultivating Qi condensation? However, that bitter smile didn't disappear from his face. This outrageous thought actually grew strongly in his mind. Why can't I? I have the medicinal power of the clear flower pill in my meridians and a few fire essence flame crystals that I haven't used yet. I have plenty of methods to increase my magic power and realm. If I were to temper my meridians with one more circulation than others, wouldn't my magic power be denser than those of the same realm for no reason? Alas, who knows how many times? My magic power already far exceeds those of the same realm. If I have this circulation of meridians, then, to what extent can I surpass them? Even foundation establishment might not necessarily be able to compare to me. Even if it's the true origin of one meridian, it can't be stronger than the true Qi of 2 or even 3 meridians, right? Besides, if I cultivate like this, my realm will be much lower than others, but my magic power will far surpass theirs. No matter if it's a real fight or if I'm risking my life, It's all a disguise so that people won't pay too much attention to it. Thinking back to the Feather Immortal Assembly, didn't Zhu Beibei of the Profound Sky sect see that my realm wasn't high enough, so she was careless? But this is a complete set of foundation establishment cultivation techniques. Can I use it when I'm cultivating qi? If I were to completely cultivate them, how long would I have to cultivate? That's someone else's foundation establishment cultivation technique. If Master were to find out, wouldn't he peel off my skin? He's in a hurry to let me build my foundation. Thus, Xiaohua was in a dilemma, and he actually sat there blankly for as long as 2 hours. In the end, Xiaohua sighed. Alas, I'd better memorize it first. I'll think about it again when I build my foundation. This time, Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He carefully memorized the cultivation technique in the jade slip from beginning to end. This foundation establishment cultivation technique was different from qi refinement cultivation technique. It wasn't divided into several layers, but was instead divided into 3 stages. Not only did Xiaohua memorize the meridians, he also memorized the tempering method for each layer. After memorizing it from beginning to end several times and making sure that he didn't miss anything, he placed the jade slip on the table. Soon after, Xiaohua finished reading the last few cultivation techniques, but he didn't discover anything else. Only then did he stand up and withdraw from the Thunder Conversion Palace's library, flying back to the Eastern Mountain Range's medicinal garden with a belly full of worries. Right after he left, a foundation establishment female cultivator appeared in the library. She picked up the jade slip that Xiaohua had read several times and looked at it again and again. Her face was also filled with bewilderment. Prairie fire cultivation technique? Is this kind of crude cultivation technique worth reading for so long? Soon after, she placed the jade slip back on the table and walked out of the library. Chapter 1660. As soon as Xiaohua left Dui Lei Palace, he flew towards the Eastern Ridgeherb Garden while taking out a blank jade slip. He used his divine sense to record the cultivation method bit by bit into the jade slip. By the time he returned to the Eastern Ridgeherb Garden, he had already finished recording the cultivation method. Looking at the sparkling jade slip in his hand, it was really like a piece of chicken rib. If he wanted to eat it, he was afraid that his master would scold him. If he didn't eat it, he was afraid that he would regret it in the future. In the blink of an eye, another half a year passed. On this day, Xiaohua was cultivating when the formation outside the mountain vibrated. Xiaohua opened the formation and a messaging talisman flew in. When Xiaohua crushed it, he heard Shue's voice. Xiaohua, I haven't heard from you in a long time. Are you building your foundation? I didn't dare to disturb you. Today, I reached the late stage of qi refining and specially sent you a message. If I disturbed you, please forgive me. Seeing Shue's message, Xiaohua felt a burst of sweetness in his heart. He said a few words and also told her about his situation. Then, he clapped his hand and sent the messaging talisman back. I wonder how Fairy Hong Xia is doing. Xiaohua looked at the bright sunlight outside the mountain and his heart was also worried. At the same time, he understood that if he didn't build his foundation, if he didn't have a great cultivation, Fairy Hong Xia's matter would only be a waste of time. Even if Fairy Hong Xia had deep feelings for him, how could the washing flower sect agree? Cultivation, cultivation. In the cultivation world, everything is decided by strength. Xiaohua sighed. Another 10 days passed. Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian came to the Eastern Ridgeherb Garden together. Xiaohua opened the formation. It turned out that the two were helplessly sent out to protect Xiaohua's foundation. Looking at the 2 middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators, Xiaohua was very moved. He bowed and thanked them. Eldest senior brother and senior sister came to protect me. Little brother is really grateful. Why are you saying so much nonsense when we're family? Xiang Yang looked at Xiaohua's cultivation and waved his hand. It seems that Master's estimation was a bit too early. How about this? Your senior sister and I won't go back. We'll cultivate in your cave. When you build your foundation, we'll go out. Go out? Xiaohua was stunned. Junior brother, The spiritual energy here is chaotic and the fire spiritual energy is violent. How can you build your foundation? I'm afraid that a large amount of spiritual chi of heaven and earth entering your meridians will be detrimental to your foundation establishment. Yan Qinglian smiled and said, besides, the 10,000 Thunder Valley won't work either. The silent thunder and the loud thunder are too powerful, so they're not suitable for foundation building. Master has already found a good place for you to build your foundation near the eastern mountain range. As long as you show signs of building your foundation, we can go there. Sigh, this little brother really didn't think about it. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Master, that old man is really thoughtful. Hee, it's also because of your eldest senior brother's matter. This time, Master is especially concerned. Oh, Master's wife won't say much. You just need to focus on your cultivation. Everything here will be taken care of by your eldest senior brother and Master's wife. After that, Xiang Yang took the Eastern Ridge Herb Gardens token from Xiao Hua and took over everything in the herb garden. The two of them sat opposite Xiao Hua and cultivated. Another month passed, and all of a sudden, the Eastern Ridge Herb Gardens array formation trembled. Xiang Yang opened the array formation, and it was none other than the Thunderquake Palace's disciples who came to collect the spiritual herbs. Seeing Xiang Yang here, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. At this time, Xiao Hua laughed loudly. Eldest senior brother, ignore him, little brother has a feeling here. What? Xiang Yang looked at Xiao Hua, who flew up and was very surprised. When he released his divine sense and looked carefully, it was the sign of building his foundation. He couldn't help but be overjoyed, clapping his hands and saying, it's extremely difficult for others to build their foundation. I didn't expect junior brother to succeed so easily. This kind of fortune, TSK, no one can compare. As he spoke, he no longer paid attention to the Thunderquake Palace's disciple and the Eastern Ridge's array formation. With a wave of his hand, he brought Xiao Hua and flew towards the west. Yan Qinglian also flew behind them. The Thunderquake Palace's disciple had an envious look on his face. He stopped in midair for a moment, thought for a while, and also flew towards the west. Xiang Yang knew that the Thunderquake Palace's disciple followed him, but he didn't stop him. Firstly, being able to see others build their foundation was beneficial to his own comprehension. In Xiang Yang's mind, Xiao Hua's successful foundation building was greatly related to his participation in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Since he obtained it, he should teach it to others. Xiang Yang had no reason to drive him away. Secondly, someone in the Myriad Thunder Valley had built their foundation, and it was a matter of glory. If it was in the 100 Grass sect, Shanghuaming, or other small sects, they should congratulate the whole sect and even invite other friendly sects to watch the ceremony. Although the Imperial Thunder sect wouldn't be so grand, Xiao Hua would be able to move out of Zhen Lei Palace legitimately in the future. He could even hand over the Eastern Ridge Herb Gardens task to the Thunderquake Palace and move to another cave in the Myriad Thunder Valley. Therefore, Xiang Yang also had the intention to show off. After flying towards the west for nearly 2 hours, Xiao Hua arrived at a place with tall mountains, dense grass, and abundant water. With a sweep of his divine sense, he knew that the spiritual energy here was abnormally dense. It was the best place to build one's foundation. He couldn't help but thank his master again. Let's do it here. Xiang Yang pointed at a place at the foot of a mountain where the sun was rising. There was lush mountain grass everywhere. At a glance, the scenery of several dozen li could be seen. Yes, I'll do as eldest senior brother says. After Xiao Hua answered, he sat down cross-legged and silently operated his cultivation technique. He didn't say anything else. That Thunderclap Palace disciple didn't dare to get too close. He found a dry place and also sat down. His eyes, however, were fixed on Xiao Hua. He didn't even blink as he wanted to memorize the signs of foundation establishment in his heart. Although Xiao Hua already felt the signs of building his foundation, there were still no signs from Xiao Hua's body until noon of the third day. Just when that thunderous Thunder Palace disciple felt tired and wanted to rest for a moment, all of a sudden, the heaven and earth spirit energy within a radius of several tens of kilometers suddenly became chaotic. An indescribable pressure was emitted from Xiao Hua's body, and that pressure instantly enveloped the entire area of several tens of kilometers. Ah? It wasn't just the Thunder Quake Palace's disciple. Even the protectors, Xiang Yang and Yen Qinglian, were greatly shocked. This place, the pressure was really too strong. The range was also too large. They felt that it was several times stronger than when they were building their foundation. And as the pressure on Xiao Hua's body continued to increase, an extremely large suction force was emitted from Xiao Hua's body. The chaotic spiritual energy in the surrounding several dozen li area swarmed towards Xiao Hua. One by one, thumb-sized sparkling beads suddenly appeared in the entire space. They were precisely the spiritual energy that had condensed into dots. This? Xiang Yang and Yen Qinglian were shocked again. Other people's foundation establishment stage cultivators had visible dots of heaven and earth spirit chi, but their junior brothers was actually the size of a thumb. This was really too unbelievable. At this moment, Xiang Yang somewhat regretted letting the Thunderquake Palace's disciple follow. Xiao Hua still hadn't taken a foundation building pill, yet he already had such a powerful foundation building. The depth of his magic power could be seen clearly. Xiang Yang had always understood the true meaning of concealing one's strength and biding one's time. This kind of profound magic power should be concealed. There was no need for others to know. Moreover, Xiao Hua was still very young. Among the many foundation-building cultivators, he could still be considered young. Now that he had just built his foundation, he was already showing off his abilities. This would be detrimental to his future cultivation. Not to mention that the Thunderquake Palace's disciple was so shocked that he couldn't even close his mouth. Xiao Hua's face was expressionless. At this moment, he sensed that the torrential true energy in his meridians was violently boiling. It was already beginning to show signs of liquefaction. But right at this moment, the torrential true energy suddenly collided with a wall in his meridians. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. Wasn't this the sign of a breakthrough in each of the 12 layers of qi refining? Moreover, wasn't that wall where the meridians of the foundation building technique he saw earlier were located? However, that vigorous true energy only collided once and then stopped. The entire true energy once again flowed along the meridians. It was no different from usual, except that the true energy's boiling was even more intense, unceasingly colliding with the walls of the meridians. At this moment, eldest senior brother Xiang Yang's unconcealed excitement reached Xiao Hua's ears. Little junior brother, you're going to take a foundation building pill now. Foundation building pill. Xiao Hua's heart was moved. He knew that as long as he used the foundation building pill, his true energy would begin to liquefy. The boiling true energy would gradually turn into liquid true essence. If he used the accumulating spirit talisman, the process of transforming true energy into true essence would be slowed down greatly. Then he would be able to cultivate again, and the liquefied true energy would be freed up in his meridians to refine true energy again. However, in this way, he would lose the opportunity to attack the wall of the 12th layer of qi refining. Thinking about the vast space in another set of meridians that might produce true energy similar to his current meridians, and thinking about it again, using the space formed by true essence to regenerate true energy, this was absolutely incomparable. Xiao Hua's heart was incomparably tangled. He was facing the most serious choice in his life, in his long journey to become a god. If he chose the normal foundation building technique and used the accumulating spirit talisman normally, he would have a stronger magical power than his peers. But what if he opened up another meridian? Would he have an even stronger magical power? Stronger and more powerful magic power was inevitable, but this was a path that no one had taken before. The future was also unknown. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause the foundation establishment to vanish like a bubble. All of his previous hardships and efforts would be for naught. Xue Xue and Fairy Hong Xia's feelings were like the setting sun. What should I do? What should I do? Xiao Hua's forehead was somewhat sweaty. Little junior brother, you can't wait any longer. You have to hurry and take the foundation building pill. Yen Qinglian was also anxious. She saw that thumb-sized spiritual pearls had condensed within a radius of 10 li. They were all quietly floating in the air, unable to be absorbed by Xiaohua. As time passed, there would definitely be a change. Fairy Hong Xia. Thinking about the moment Fairy Hong Xia entered foundation building, and thinking about how the Washing Flower sect had treated him that day, Xiaohua's heart steeled for no reason. There has always been no path in this world. But as long as there are many people walking on it, there will naturally be a path. If this young master doesn't walk on it, who would know that this is a path? Today, this young master will walk the path that no one has walked before. I will let the heavens know my heart, let the earth know my intentions. Even if this path is impassable, this young master will cut through all the thistles and thorns to carve out a path. Chapter 1661. With that thought, a faint smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. With a wave of his hand, he took out a dozen soul-gathering pills from his space and put them in his mouth. When Xiang Yang saw Xiaohua finally take out the pills, the stone in his heart finally fell to the ground, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. However, Yan Qinglian was careful. With a glance, she saw Xiaohua take out a dozen pills, and her heart jumped. How could an aura-refining cultivator take a dozen foundation-building pills all at once when building their foundation? Even if their cultivation level wasn't high enough, they still had to take them one by one. However, when she saw Xiaohua take out soul-gathering pills, the expression on her face changed greatly. Xiaohua took a dozen soul-gathering pills. The true energy produced by the soul-gathering pills filled Xiaohua's meridians to the brim. At this time, the dragon transformation art also showed its effect. It wanted to slightly expand his meridians, but Xiaohua tried his best to stop his meridians from expanding. On one hand, he mobilized his true energy to fiercely hit the barrier. Once, twice, he tried a dozen times in a row, but he still couldn't break it. Xiang Yang, who was standing not far from Xiaohua, was somewhat anxious. He whispered, "Junior brother, if it doesn't work, you can take another foundation-building pill." Yes, other people take a foundation-building pill to have the phenomenon of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensing. You didn't take a foundation-building pill, but now you took a foundation-building pill, but there was no change. How could Xiang Yang not be anxious? Yan Qinglian, who was at the side, stretched out her hand, wanting to pull Xiang Yang's sleeve. However, her hand stopped halfway, and she bit her lower lip. She really didn't know what Xiaohua was doing. She also didn't know how to explain it to Xiang Yang. However, at this moment, the foundation-building pressure coming from Xiaohua's body suddenly disappeared, as if it had never appeared. The spiritual energy condensing pearls within a radius of a dozen li also gradually melted like snow under the sun, disappearing without a trace. Ah? Xiang Yang's face once again showed incomparable astonishment. He really didn't expect that such a powerful foundation building, such a large area of condensing pearls, would actually fail so easily. Yes, failure. This was the thought that never crossed his mind when he saw Xiaohua start building his foundation. In an instant, incomparable disappointment grew in his heart. Unexpectedly, it was even more dispirited than his failure to build his foundation. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. This was indeed the case. Yan Qinglian was also greatly shocked in her heart, but when she looked at Xiaohua again, her face, which still had a slight smile just now, had now returned to normal without any joy or sorrow, as if nothing had happened just now. Xiao. Just as Xiang Yang was about to ask, Yan Qinglian pulled him back and shook her head slightly. Xiang Yang sighed, not knowing what to say. He could only shake his head and cast a sideways glance at the shocking Thunder Palace disciples in the distance. Their faces were also filled with confusion, but there was a hint of Schadenfreude in their eyes. He thought to himself, "Sigh, my 10,000 Thunder Valley has become a laughing stock again." At this time, Xiaohua didn't have too many thoughts in his heart. Since he had already made his choice, he could only move forward. However, when true qi rushed into the new meridians, it was somewhat difficult for Xiaohua. After all, what he obtained was the cultivation method of a foundation building stage cultivation technique. Moreover, he didn't start from the early stage of the foundation building stage. According to the position of the meridians, it should be the circulation method of the late stage of the foundation building stage. Moreover, he even started from half of the late stage meridians. Fortunately, the cultivation method of this prairie fire cultivation technique was actually effective. Following Xiaohua's circulation according to the cultivation method, new spiritual energy of heaven and earth had already entered his body. At the same time, it also started to temper the new meridians. However, when Xiaohua was halfway through the cultivation method, an abnormality occurred again. This prairie fire cultivation technique's late-stage cultivation method could only be used by half, and the other half couldn't be used at all. What's going on? Xiaohua thought to himself, could it be because what's being tempered is true qi and not true essence? If that's the case, can the first, middle, and last 3 layers of this prairie fire cultivation technique correspond to the 6th layer of the aura refining stage? Then, wouldn't I have reached the 18th layer of the aura refining stage? As soon as the thought of reaching the 18th layer of the aura refining stage appeared in Xiaohua's mind, an incomparable confidence was born in his heart. It was as if this aura refining stage should be at the 18th layer. Soon after, Xiaohua once again circulated his cultivation method. After stabilizing his realm, he opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was Xiang Yang's pair of indescribable eyes. However, seeing Xiaohua open his eyes, Xiang Yang's gaze immediately changed into one of comfort. He said with a smile, "Little junior brother, don't be anxious. This is only your first time building your foundation. Failure is inevitable. This failure was already clearly explained to Master when he accepted you as his disciple that day. Presumably, you've also made sufficient preparations. You see, didn't elder brother also use 50 years to build my foundation? If you cultivate for a few more years, you'll definitely be able to build your foundation a second time." Xiaohua's face didn't carry any dejection. Admittedly, he couldn't tell eldest senior brother about the matter of the 13th layer of the aura refining stage. However, seeing eldest senior brother's sincere concern, Xiaohua said with a smile, "Many thanks for eldest senior brother's concern. Little junior brother is originally a loose cultivator, and his foundation is really bad. Not being able to build my foundation is precisely within little junior brother's expectations. On the contrary, eldest senior brother was disappointed by my great momentum just now. Alas, elder brother, can't say that I'm disappointed. I just didn't want little junior brother to walk on elder brother's path again. However, no matter how much I calculated, little junior brother still followed elder brother." Xiang Yang couldn't help but sigh. Elder brother only has regret, but what about Master? Alas, of course, there's still Master. Xiaohua had a bitter smile on his face as he recalled the helplessness he felt when he wholeheartedly wanted to build his foundation. "Senior brother Xiao," a distant Thunderclap Palace disciple shouted, "I've already been waiting here for many days. Since senior brother Xiao hasn't been able to build his foundation, please hand over the spiritual plants to I as soon as possible so that I can return to the palace and report back." Good. Xiaohua naturally didn't feel anything in his heart, so he said goods 3 times in a row. He turned his head and asked, "Eldest senior brother, should little junior brother return to Myriad Thunder Valley to see Master? What do you think?" Xiang Yang asked back. "All right, eldest senior brother, please wait a moment. This place is also on the way back to Myriad Thunder Valley. After little junior brother delivers the spiritual plants, little junior brother will return to Myriad Thunder Valley with eldest senior brother and senior sister-in-law." As he spoke, he unfolded his figure, flew in front of the Thunderclap Palace disciple, and said, "Let's go." At this time, the Thunderclap Palace disciple's deference was gone. He slightly nodded his head, only showing the only courtesy he had, and followed Xiaohua as he flew towards Eastern Ridge. After all, the number of times Xiaohua could build his foundation was limited. If Xiaohua couldn't build his foundation this time, the next chance would be even less. Moreover, whether there would be a next time was still uncertain. If nothing unexpected happened, Xiaohua would only be an aura refining cultivator in this lifetime. This Thunderclap Palace disciple wouldn't be respectful to him. As he watched Xiaohua fly away, Xiangyang heavily sighed. How is this possible? Even without taking a foundation-building pill, there are signs of building his foundation. How can he still fail after taking a foundation-building pill? Yan Qinglian's eyes turned, and she said in a low voice, Husband, are you sure little junior brother took a foundation-building pill? Tao. Helplessness was greatly alarmed. He had never thought that Xiaohua would be so careless when building his foundation. Inside the immortal's cave, Helplessness's face was gloomy, even thicker than the red clouds of a winter night. With a bang, Helplessness's hand slapped the stone chair, and he scolded, Xiangyang, what the hell are you doing? I originally wanted you to take Xiaohua to that place to build his foundation to avoid people's eyes and ears, but you actually let a Thunderclap Palace disciple follow him. You let an aura-refining brat watch our myriad Thunder Valleys bustle. How did you become the eldest senior brother? Master? Xiangyang wanted to argue, but after calling him master, he didn't know what to say. He couldn't just drive him away, right? Moreover, looking at Xiaohua's appearance, he was actually able to sense his own foundation. He definitely had 100% certainty. Even with that kind of momentum of building his foundation, even disciples who hadn't built their foundation wouldn't suspect that Xiaohua had failed to build his foundation. However, as it happened, Xiaohua had failed. As for Xiaohua taking a soul-gathering pill and not a foundation-building pill, although Yan Qinglian had told Xiangyang simply didn't believe her. Who would be so bored as to make things difficult for him? Not building his foundation? Moreover, why would he take a soul-gathering pill at this time? The true qi in his entire meridians was already saturated. If he wanted to increase it, he had to liquefy his true qi into true essence. That could only be done by taking a foundation-building pill. It was impossible for Xiaohua to take a soul-gathering pill. Of course, while Xiangyang firmly believed, he also warned Yan Qinglian that this kind of matter absolutely couldn't be revealed to Master Wu Hai. He knew that Wu Hai had a lot of expectations for Xiaohua's foundation building. Master, it's all this disciple's fault. It has nothing to do with eldest senior brother. Xiaohua's complexion was calm as he bowed and said, Wu Hai glanced at Xiaohua. The anger he had been holding back for a long time finally came out. Xiaohua, you little bastard. What should I say about you? You clearly know that you're a loose cultivator. You once practiced 2 kinds of cultivation methods during the aura refining stage. Your true qi is mottled and impure, so you have to put more effort into your cultivation. Don't put your thoughts on the unorthodox path. What sword pill, what divine accumulation talisman, what magic treasure, those things aren't the right path. Only by properly practicing cultivation methods and smoothly building your foundation can you be considered a true success. Take a look at yourself. At that time, the signs of foundation building were abundant, and you were so arrogant, but what was the use of that? Didn't you still fail? You have to know, enough is enough. Going too far is as bad as falling short. That's what I'm talking about. You blindly pursue profound magic power. That's only neglecting the essentials and pursuing the trifles. What do you want me to say about you? Bang, another sound rang out, and he slapped the stone chair. What did I teach you that day? Do you still think I'm your master? Husband. At the side, Zhuo Minghui laughed apologetically. This is only Xiaohua's first time building his foundation. It's not like he won't have another chance in the future. Aren't you just adding to his burden by saying so much? How will he cultivate in the future? How will he cultivate? He has a senior brother at his side who used 50 years to build his foundation. How will he know how to cultivate? Wu Hai sneered helplessly. Soon after, he waved his large sleeve and said, Go, don't hang around in front of me. Ask your eldest senior brother what to do in the future. Hurry up and cultivate. In a few days, the news of my myriad Thunder Valley's second disciple failing to build his foundation will spread throughout the entire Thunderclap Palace. Sigh, should I go accept another disciple? Wu Hai muttered helplessly in a low voice. Chapter 1662. Xiao Hua, Xiang Yang, and the others got up, bowed, and left with their master. When they arrived at Xiang Yang's immortal's cave, Xiang Yang thought for a moment, then said with a smile, "Junior brother, don't worry too much. Master has too many expectations for you." What he said just now, he, eldest senior brother, how could I not know what kind of person Master is? I failed to build my foundation. I've let down Master's cultivation, so it's reasonable for Master to scold me a few times. Xiao Hua said with a smile. It's best that junior brother thinks this way. Xiang Yang was very gratified and said again, as for how to cultivate in the future, I think junior brother should meditate and comprehend more in the next period of time. Comprehend the feeling of building your foundation, reflect on why you can't build your foundation, and where the problem lies. Then I'll tell junior brother how to cultivate. Yes, junior brother understands. Xiao Hua cupped his hands. Junior brother will go back now and come find eldest senior brother when I have some comprehension. Okay, you can go now. Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian sent Xiao Hua to the entrance of the immortal's cave. Yan Qinglian asked again, Junior brother, how's the clear flower pill's medicinal efficacy in your meridians? Master's restriction is still there, so there's no problem, Xiao Hua said with a smile. And that's good. If there's anything abnormal, quickly come to Myriad Thunder Valley. Junior brother will remember. Xiao Hua saluted and said goodbye, then returned to the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden. Sitting cross-legged in the immortal's cave, Xiao Hua frowned and pondered. What Xiang Yang said didn't match his situation, so there was nothing he could use as a reference. However, if he wanted to cultivate the 13th layer of the aura refining realm, what should he do? What medicinal pill should he take? Could it be that he had to take Foundation Establishment medicinal pills? Of course, Xiao Hua also had Foundation Establishment medicinal pills in his space, but he didn't dare to take them rashly. He could only take them under the watch of Xiang Yang and other Foundation Establishment cultivators. This way, there must be a reason. What reason do I need? With that thought in mind, Xiao Hua took out his bag of holding. He wanted to take out some medicinal pills, but when he scanned it with his divine will, he smiled. The bag of holding's array formation had already been destroyed, and the medicinal pills inside had long since been transferred to another bag of holding. After thinking about it for a while, he had forgotten about it. Just as Xiao Hua withdrew his divine sense, he suddenly sensed some spirit energy fluctuations behind the collapsed array formation. These fluctuations were completely different from the spatial collapse Xiao Hua had seen before. What's going on? Xiao Hua was stunned. He picked up the storage pouch and carefully looked at it. This was precisely the storage pouch that he had coveted for other people's high-level storage pouch, and didn't return it to Bai Zone. I understand now. Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. That golden core expert who tried to kill martial ancestor Zhen Qing probably came for this storage pouch, right? When he thought of this, all his doubts were easily solved. Only if there was something in the storage pouch that he didn't know about would it be worth it for Aurus core stage cultivators to take action. However, when Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over it, because the spatial array inside the storage pouch still hadn't collapsed, there were only fluctuations of spiritual energy inside, yet he couldn't see what was inside. Forget it, I'll think about it later. Xiao Hua carefully hid the storage pouch close to his body, then took out another medicinal pill from the other storage pouch. Naturally, Xiao Hua racked his brains for half a night, but he still couldn't think of a reason to take the medicinal pill. Even if it was the clear flower pill in his meridians, Yan Qinglian had already warned him before, so it wouldn't be good to use it as an excuse. Damn it, I've been caught in a trap of my own making. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and bitterly smiled. I can't cultivate at a tortoise's pace like the first layer of qi refining. Fire essence flame crystal. I'm worried about personal gains and losses. Didn't I already think of this when I was in Zhen Lei Palace's book collection pavilion? Xiao Hua suddenly revealed a trace of a smile on his face. Back then, when Xiao Hua was besieged by 4 Foundation Establishment stage cultivators from Shanghua sect, Qiqiao sect, and Xuanyan school, he took the risk and used the fire essence flame crystal to raise his cultivation from the 4th layer of qi refining to the 10th layer of qi refining. The danger was obvious. If it wasn't for the fact that Xiaohua had no other choice, he definitely wouldn't have taken such a risk. Now, although he wanted to use the fire essence flame crystal to raise his cultivation, he definitely needed a foolproof plan before he was willing to use it. But how could Xiaohua have a foolproof plan? After thinking about it, if he didn't want his master or senior brother to come and protect him, he could only take the risk himself. Xiaohua carefully thought about his experience of using the fire essence flame crystal last time and felt a sense of powerlessness. After all, the flames that the fire essence flame crystal had turned into had mostly been absorbed by his body, meridians, and bones. Only a small portion had been refined by him using the cultivation method of the Heavenly Laws embodiment technique. Xiaohua could only control this small portion of fire attribute spiritual energy. The majority of it was up to fate. Without the risk of being caught, Xiaohua naturally wasn't willing to take such a risk. He couldn't help but hesitate for a few more days. On this day, a fire essence flame crystal the size of a mung bean floated in front of Xiaohua. Its scorching aura submerged the entire cave. Its scarlet color was abnormally deep. Upon closer inspection, it was actually somewhat black. It actually absorbed all the light and couldn't reflect it. Should I use it or not? If I don't use it properly, my body will break and I will die. Xiaohua frowned. At this moment, the spell formation of the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden shook. Obviously, someone came from outside. But could it be senior brother? Xiaohua's brows slightly relaxed. He put away the fire essence flame crystal and left the spell formation. Outside the spell formation, it was obviously not Xiang Yang, but Xue Xue and Sun Shu. Seeing Xiaohua fly out of the spell formation, Xue Xue couldn't help but fly over and extend her hand. With a smile on her face, she said, "Xiaohua." Xiaohua's heart warmed. He reached out and held her warm hands. He glanced at Sun Shu, who had already turned his head to the side, and said in a low voice, "Xue Xue, why are you here?" "I heard that you failed to build your foundation, so I specially came to see you." Xiaohua frowned and said in a low voice, "What? Even you know that I failed to build my foundation?" Xue Xue held his hand and said with a smile, "Look at you. You don't need to be nervous. I'm just worried about you. I've always been inquiring about you." Xiaohua looked deeply at Xue Xue and said with a smile, "Of course I know about your feelings. However, you're in Sun Lei Palace. I'm just a little aura refining disciple of Zun Lei Palace. Even if you wanted to inquire about me, you wouldn't be able to do so, right?" Xue Xue clenched her teeth. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment. Then she raised her head and said, "Let's go over there and talk, okay?" "Up to you." "Senior Sister Sun, I'll have to trouble you to wait for a moment. I'll go with Xiaohua. I'll be right back." When Sun Shu heard this, she didn't turn her head and said loudly, "Go quickly and come back quickly. Our time is limited. Don't make any mistakes. Let's go." With a smile on her face, Xue Xue pulled Xiaohua into the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. After finding a place filled with gorgeous mountain flowers, Xue Xue hugged Xiaohua and buried her face in his chest. She said in a low voice, "Xiaohua, I've missed you so much. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it." Chapter 1663. Feeling Xue Xue's hands wrapped around his arms, and also feeling Xue Xue's burning hot tender body on his body, Xiaohua's heroic heart had long since turned soft. Similarly, he used his hands to wrap around Xue Xue's waist and stuck his face to Xue Xue's forehead. Then, Xue Xue coquettishly pouted and raised her head. After another moment of tenderness, Xue Xue's face was already red. She said in a low voice, "Xiao, you can be considered a famous figure among the Imperial Thunder Sect's refinement disciples. Ever since the Feather Immortal Assembly, I've always heard of your name. Who knows how many people envy your cultivation?" I'm afraid it's not that simple, right?" Xiaohua sneered. Of course, the ones who envy the most are naturally you and Hong Xia Fairy." Xue Xue laughed. and her tone was filled with jealousy. I don't care what they think. What I'm worried about is little Xue Xue's thoughts. Xiaohua kissed Xue Xue's forehead and said in a low voice, how am I young? Xue Xue coquettishly pouted. You don't seem to be older than me, right? Xiaohua felt Xue Xue's mood and unconsciously became restless. Xue Xue sensed it and hurriedly pushed him a little. She said in a low voice, it's precisely because you're in the limelight that many pairs of eyes are staring at myriad Thunder Valley. The entire Imperial Thunder sect knows that you failed to build your foundation a few days ago. I'm worried about you, so I specially came to look for you. Hee, could it be that you think I can't build my foundation? Xiaohua's eyes contained a smile. Xue Xue pulled her hand out from Xiaohua's back and reached out to support Xiaohua's neck. Her eyes were somewhat blurred as she said in a low voice, Xiaohua still has a chance to build his foundation. Even if Xiaohua can't build his foundation, I will still accompany you. As she spoke, she used her arm to pull Xiaohua's head down. Her cherry-red lips greeted him, and she answered with fiery passion. After a while, Xue Xue said in a low voice, I came out with senior sister Sun to do something, so I can't stay here for long. Xiaohua, you can cultivate in peace. I'll help you look at master and see if there's any remedy. Even if it doesn't work, I can't build my foundation in 50 years. I don't believe that Xiao can't build his foundation. Xiaohua nodded and said, many thanks for little Xue Xue's kind intentions. I will definitely work hard. Xue Xue smiled. I know. I came here today to tell you that no matter if you build your foundation or not, no matter what my cultivation level is in the future, my heart will follow you. Xiaohua's heart heated up and he was very moved. Xue Xue. Shu, you don't have to say anything, darling Xiao. Xue Xue's voice was as gentle as water. Right at this moment, a message talisman was sent over. It was Sun Shu urging him. I'm leaving Xiaohua. Xue Xue stood on her tiptoes and kissed Xiaohua's cheek. Xiaohua had already made a decision in his heart and said with a smile. After sending Xue Xue out of the Eastern Ridge Formation, Sun Shu was already waiting. He looked deeply at Xiaohua, as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. He only said to Xue Xue, Junior Sister Xue, let's hurry and leave. I'll follow Senior Sister Sun's instructions. Xue Xue's face was slightly bashful as she said to Xiaohua, then, you cultivate carefully. I'm leaving. Xiaohua looked at the two and didn't ask what Sun Shu wanted to say. He raised his hand and bid farewell to the two. When Xue Xue's reluctant gaze disappeared from Xiaohua's field of vision, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and flew back to the eastern ridge. After closing the formation, he sat cross-legged on the foothills of a tall mountain in the eastern ridge medicinal garden and quietly adjusted his breathing. He only waited for the next morning. When the first ray of sunlight shone on Xiaohua's body, Xiaohua waved his hand and a bean-sized fire essence flame crystal appeared in his hand. Then, without hesitation, he patted it on his arm. Just like last time, with a boom, his entire arm was ignited by the fire essence flame crystal. Immediately after, Xiaohua's entire body's 132 million points flashed just as Xiaohua had imagined. Like 132 million small mouths, they swallowed the flames that were burning near them. A heart-wrenching pain spread throughout Xiaohua's entire body. When he looked at the muscles beside the 132 million points, he could faintly see threads of fire flickering. These fire threads burned Xiaohua's muscles at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. However, at the same time that the muscles were burned, new muscles regenerated at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. The new muscles were even thicker than the previous ones and contained even more things that weren't there before. Everything was the same as last time when he used the fire essence flame crystal. Xiaohua was in so much pain that he couldn't bear it. He roared loudly and maintained a trace of clarity in his heart. He used the incomplete vigorous Vajradharma body technique that Han Zhu gave him. Speaking of which, it was strange. Just as he started to use the technique, the 13,200 little points began to tremble slightly and absorbed even more flames. Following the circulation of the technique, a shadow emerged from one of the little points. Then a second and a third. Many more shadows slowly emerged. Only when the shadows gradually stopped appearing did the heart-wrenching pain gradually disappear. Immediately after, just like last time, a huge suction force came from the bones and sucked the flames into the bones. The originally grayish-white bones suddenly turned into the shape of white jade. At this moment, 40% of the white jade bones were densely entwined with crimson blood threads. After the bones were refined by the flames, the crimson blood threads gradually spread and gradually, 60% of the bones were entwined by the crimson blood threads. It's time for the dragon transformation art. Xiao Hua silently chanted in his heart and used the prairie fire cultivation technique. Sure enough, once the flames touched his meridians absorbed the flames like a fire dragon. The dragon transformation art madly rotated and sucked the majority of the flames into his meridians. In an instant, Xiao Hua's meridians twitched and faintly flashed with red light. Just like last time, the dragon transformation art was pushed forward at a speed several times faster than usual. Xiao Hua looked at the remaining flames in his meridians and saw that there was only 10% of the flames left. Alas, could it be that, in a while, more flames will come out from my meridians? Xiao Hua sighed slightly, but at this moment, he didn't have time to think too much. He activated the prairie fire cultivation technique in his meridians and began to refine the flames. Fortunately, a foundation establishment cultivation technique was a foundation establishment cultivation technique. It was far from being comparable to a chi refinement cultivation technique. The flames transformed from the fire essence flame crystal didn't suddenly explode like the heavenly laws embodiment technique last time, nor did it transform into a different kind of flames. Instead, following the activation of the cultivation technique, it gradually flowed within his meridians and was gradually refined by the cultivation technique, becoming true qi within Xiao Hua's meridians. Alas, until now, when he saw that everything had returned to normal, Xiao Hua finally let out a sigh of relief from his heart. At this moment, the bones that were sparkling and translucent like jade earlier were now almost 60% scarlet red in color. However, the flames were still incessantly burning the bones. The illusory figures of the 13,200 million small dots also left the position of the small dots, faintly showing signs of floating out of Xiao Hua's body. Chapter 1664. Xiao Hua's usage of the fire essence flame crystal this time was different from the last time. Although he had used the prairie fire cultivation technique to absorb the remaining flames into his meridians to refine them, the flames on his bones and the flames burning his body did not immediately disappear. Instead, they were slowly being refined. As early as when Xiao Hua had fused the fire essence flame crystal into his arm and ignited his entire body, there was a fist-sized chunk of lava in the depths of the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden. That fist was surrounded by cold and in rocks, and the inside of the fist was divided into several layers. The outermost layer was magma that was like water, and the innermost layer was solidified and turned into a crystal. The innermost layer was emptiness, just like the emptiness of air. However, in this emptiness, there was a trace of a pitch-black collapse. It was the kind of collapse that was so hot that it was about to burn the space. As the flames around Xiao Hua's body lingered, the pitch-black collapse in the innermost layer of the crystal actually moved towards Xiao Hua little by little. Xiao Hua sat on top of the mountain like this. Flames lingered around his body, calcining his bones and producing virtual points. This continued for 99 days. When the 100th day was up, the rising sun in the east shone its first rays on Xiao Hua's body. The strange flames suddenly retracted and were absorbed into Xiao Hua's body. The scarlet color on the bones had already covered 60% of them. However, this scarlet color was still somewhat mottled and impure. Immediately after, the bones flashed with brilliance and returned to their original grayish-white color. There were no longer any abnormalities. Similarly, the 13,200 virtual points that were produced also separated from the black dots at this time. They piled up together and formed the framework of another human figure. However, this human figure was much taller and sturdier than Xiao Hua. It was actually similar to a King Kong. Following the disappearance of the flames outside Xiao Hua's body, The pitch-black collapse that had risen from the ground for 99 days also stopped. Immediately after, at the place where it stopped, the rocks around an inch around it were all burned into gas. The rocks an inch away from it were also burned into lava. Facing the rising sun, Xiaohua opened his eyes, and there was a confident smile on his face. But after a long time, a bitter smile appeared on his face, and he wiped his head with his hand, and said to himself, "Alas, my hair is gone again." Soon after, Xiaohua didn't get up. He slightly circulated the true energy in his body and smiled as he muttered to himself, as expected of the fire marrow and flame crystal, as expected of a foundation establishment cultivation method. I have only cultivated for 100 days, and this realm has already reached the middle stage of the 13th layer of the aura refining realm. Moreover, the flame in my meridians is more than half of what it was before. If nothing unexpected happens, in another 100 days or so, I'll be able to set foot into the so-called 14th layer of the aura refining realm. I wonder, what's the difference between I's 14th layer of qi refining and foundation establishment? Soon after, Xiaohua floated up from the ground. He lowered his head and looked at the ground that had long been burned by the flames of the fire essence flame crystal. He used the hibernating thunder escape and returned to the cave. On one hand, he continued to practice the prairie fire mental cultivation method to refine the flames and increase his cultivation base. On the other hand, he divided his attention to practice the exquisite shell-leaf heart sutra of the Buddhist sect and pondered over the Buddha Saraira in his Naiwan palace. Normally, when a cultivator practices qi refining, they must concentrate on one thing and should avoid being distracted the most. However, Xiaohua had many different cultivation methods. If he practiced them separately, it would inevitably affect his own progress. Therefore, when Xiaohua used the blood shadow art to practice the dragonization ability, he was already moved. He gradually tried to use the secret of this cultivation method in other aspects. In particular, the Buddhist sect's Buddha Saraira cultivation method was completely different from the Taoist sect's qi refining method. One refined true qi in the meridians, while the other constructed Saraira outside the Naiwan palace. Using some of the secrets of the blood shadow art, they complemented each other and didn't interfere with each other. This young master is a genius. Xiaohua's little tail unconsciously stuck up. Just like that, several days passed peacefully. On this day, Xiaohua's heart was moved. He reached into his body and took out the storage pouch. When he scanned it with his divine sense, he was stunned. He saw that the spatial formation had already collapsed. However, after it collapsed, there was still an extremely large spatial formation under this formation. This storage pouch actually had 2 layers of space. He saw that this hidden space was empty. There was only an arrow-like object that was several times larger than a command token. It emitted a blue light and floated in the storage pouch. What is this thing? It can actually make a gold core stage cultivator take action? Xiaohua naturally knew that this thing was the real thing inside the storage pouch. He thought it was a bit strange. Soon after, he took out the arrow-like command token. He saw that the command token seemed to be made of gold but not gold. There were very simple runes engraved on it. These runes were different from what Xiaohua usually saw. It seemed very mysterious. Xiaohua didn't recognize a single one of these words, but each of these words seemed to emit a distant aura. At first glance, they actually resembled the green seal script, and even the words on the tortoise shell were somewhat similar. Damn, could it be that this is an ancient object? Xiaohua was a bit flabbergasted. What is this thing used for? In his divine sense, the spiritual energy fluctuations on the command token weren't particularly strong. It was just a bit obscure. Xiaohua held the command token in his hand and resisted the urge to pour his magic power into it. With a wave of his hand, he placed the command token into the storage pouch. Damn, even if a gold core stage cultivator comes again, this command token is still this young master's. Xiaohua's mouth hung a trace of a sneer. Since the meat was already in his mouth, wanting to spit it out, humph, humph, that would be extremely difficult. But immediately after, Xiaohua thought, what exactly is this thing? I can't go ask people. I can't always keep it in my storage pouch. Moreover, I encountered many things in the past, but I don't know what they are. This is really annoying. Although these things can only be learned when I travel, but my cultivation is more important right now. How can I go out so easily? Forget it, doesn't this young master have the sect master's command token? Zhen Xie and Kan Mingwei were able to find the Buddhist ruins in the library pavilion. Should this young master also go and take a look? It seems that the Imperial Thunder Sect's library pavilion doesn't have many cultivation methods, but there are many other anecdotes. Even if I can't go out and travel, I can look at the senior's letters and expand my knowledge, right? This sect head command token can't be used only once, right? Thinking about this, Xiaohua stood up. His cultivation method was very different from others. He didn't particularly care about the surrounding spiritual energy. There was no difference between cultivating in this cave and cultivating in the library pavilion. Since that was the case, if he could take the time to read more books and expand his knowledge, why not? Xiaohua left the Eastern Mountain Medicinal Garden and closed the spell formation. He looked around and frowned. Then he didn't use the hibernating lightning escape technique and only used the flight technique to fly away. He leisurely flew towards the nearest lightning palace. After he flew away, an early Foundation establishment stage cultivator appeared in the distance. This person didn't wear a camouflage robe, but an ordinary Taoist robe. Humph, Xiaohua is only SOSO. Why is 4th senior so cautious? Chapter 1665. Motherfucker, who is this? I've already been cultivating inside the formation for nearly 100 days. Don't tell me this guy has been waiting outside the formation for 100 days? What if I don't come out today? Wouldn't he have to keep waiting? Xiaohua didn't release his divine sense but instead released his Buddhist sense. This Buddhist sense was the most miraculous. That Foundation establishment cultivator simply didn't detect it. Don't tell me that the lost command tablet is in this guy's hands? Xiaohua thought. After flying for a while, he stopped again and secretly observed that Foundation establishment cultivator. Who knew that cultivator simply didn't approach the Eastern Ridge Medicine Garden's formation. Instead, he flew away on his own. Strange, this person? Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. Forget it, I'll just be careful in the future. Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed. His figure unfolded, and he used the hibernating thunder escape to fly away. However, just as he flew up, Xiaohua discovered that he had already cultivated the first level of the lightning escape technique to perfection. He had reached the standard to cultivate the second level of the awakening lightning escape. Light escape. As expected, it's the world's #1 escape technique. Xiaohua faced the sky and laughed heartily. I've only just tempered my bones to 60%. I haven't even finished cultivating the first level, and this lightning escape has already advanced to the second level. Like this, the thunderclap 9th heaven is definitely within reach. While laughing, Xiaohua secretly recalled the cultivation method of the awakening lightning escape. On the road, he also began to practice the awakening lightning escape. Not to mention that Xiaohua once again entered the various Lightning Palace's library pavilions to prepare to read extensively to make up for his lack of experience. On top of a precipitous mountain in Xuanyan School, a young cultivator with a face full of unswerving determination was kneeling in front of a gray-haired golden core cultivator, listening to the cultivator's teachings. This young cultivator was actually the 11th level Qi refinement Xiao Mao. This mountain was different from other places in Xuanyan School. The difference wasn't in the terrain, but in the climate. In the cultivation world, the weather was naturally unpredictable. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning were numerous. However, within Xuanyan School's mountain gate, the weather was also affected by the sect's protective formation. The bright spring sun, gentle wind, and drizzle were all cultivators' favorite. Who didn't want to have a comfortable environment to leisurely cultivate in? However, on the mountain where Xiao Mao was, the wind was chilly and bone-chilling. The rain was icy cold and chilled one's heart and lungs. At this moment, Xiao Mao's entire body was drenched by the cold rain. When the cold wind blew, bits of ice were about to condense on Xiao Mao's Taoist robe. Xiao Mao's face was ashen, and his lips were purple from the cold, trembling slightly. Xiao Mao, you've already reached the 10th layer of qi refining and are about to enter the late stage. If nothing unexpected happens, you'll be able to enter the 11th layer within a few years. The middle stage Aurus Core cultivator in front of Xiao Mao was sitting cross-legged in midair. There seemed to be an invisible shield around him that blocked the drizzling rain outside. Even the gusts of wind could not blow the goatee on his chin. But your cultivation level is really quite high within my Xuanyan school. To tell the truth, if it wasn't for the sect master's orders, this old man definitely wouldn't have accepted you as a disciple. Especially when you already have a master to guide you. Xiao Mao's body trembled slightly, but he still spoke in a trembling voice. This disciple understands. This disciple's talent is poor and has made master difficult. Xiao Mao's words were from the bottom of his heart. He also understood that this Aurus Core cultivator before him, Yuan Jiming, was extremely resourceful and had endless means. He was also well known within Xuanyan school. However, this senior's temperament was also strange. He never liked peace and harmony, and did not like to interact with others. His residence was also dangerous, and the weather was strange. Moreover, this senior had never accepted a disciple. If it wasn't for the sect master's order, Xiao Mao might not even have been able to meet the senior, much less become his disciple. Actually, when it came to becoming a disciple, Xiao Mao didn't understand either. Ever since he used the fire essence flame crystal in the ice cave last time, he saw his seniors, who had better aptitudes and cultivation levels than him, exploding and dying one by one. His heart was filled with despair. However, the dragon transformation skill that he had been secretly cultivating really surprised him. Every time the fire spiritual energy in his body went out of control and wanted to break through his meridians, the meridians in his body were unbelievably tough. Every time the spiritual energy in his body went out of control and wanted to break through his meridians, the meridians in his body were unbelievably tough. The more it was like this, the more grateful Xiao Mao felt towards the big brother Xiao Hua that he had rashly recognized that day. This feeling came from the bottom of his heart, a kind of heartfelt admiration. In the end, when he narrowly escaped death and cultivated the skill to the 10th level, he was brought in front of the sect master, ferrying Zhuo with the other two disciples, Pan Hao and Feng Linhua. Only then did he finally understand the importance of his survival to Xuanyan school. After all, Xiao Mao was only the most ordinary disciple of Xuanyan school. Under normal circumstances, it was absolutely impossible for him to meet ferrying Zhuo. Moreover, on that day in the Yanling Palace, other than the sect master, the other elders were also present. These were all people that Xiao Mao had only heard of, but had never seen before. This was not the most important thing. When ferrying Zhuo finished inspecting the cultivation levels of Xiao Mao and the other two, she praised them greatly and rewarded them with spiritual medicine. Moreover, she appointed each of the three disciples to be a master of the Aurus Core stage to guide them in their future cultivation. Even when Xiao Mao came to this cold mountain with the sect master's token, he was still in a dream. Until he knelt in the cold wind and rain, kneeling in front of Yuan Jiming. Although he suffered endless torment, his heart was boiling with passion. A master of the Aurus Core stage, this was something that he had never dreamt of. What's so difficult about it? Yuan Jiming snorted coldly. That voice pierced Xiao Mao's heart and lungs. A moment ago his heart was boiling hot, but at this moment, it was ice cold. See? Xiao Mao could not help but groan and grit his teeth tightly. However, it was still very cold. That kind of trembling that came from the bottom of his heart could not be suppressed and spread to the outside of his body. Xiao Mao's teeth were chattering. Yuan Jiming sneered again, but this time, the sneer was only heard by the ear. How much wind and rain have you endured? Such a simple cold already made you so uncomfortable. The sect master even said that your body is strong, and told I to train more. Disciple, doesn't dare. Xiao Mao stammered. If you become my disciple, you will have to endure such hardships every day. Yuan Jiming said coldly again. Moreover, I have many tricks up my sleeves. This cold wind and rain is just a small trick. Are you willing? Thrilling. Xiao Mao agreed. Yuan Jiming scanned with his divine sense and naturally knew that Xiao Mao was already at the limit of his endurance. With a wave of his sleeve, a ray of light covered Xiao Mao, blocking the wind and rain outside. Thank you, master. Xiao Mao was just about to speak when Yuan Jiming whispered to him, "Shut up and listen carefully. Circulate the true qi in your body according to the previous cultivation method, and comprehend according to this old man's chant. This old man will only repeat this chant once. Whether you understand it or not, this old man will not repeat it a second time." As he spoke, his lips moved slightly and the chant was transmitted into Xiao Mao's ears. Xiao Mao did not dare to delay and immediately circulated the cultivation method, circulating the true qi in his meridians. At the same time, he listened carefully to the mantra, comprehending it carefully according to Yuan Jiming's explanation, and then mixed it into the cultivation method. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the mantra had been completely imparted. Xiao Mao did not dare to stop and continued to chant in his heart, circulating his true qi a few more times. When he stopped and checked, he could not help but be dumbfounded. In this short period of time, his cultivation had increased more than twice as much as usual. Master's remarkable ability is something that I would never have dreamed of. Xiao Mao could not help but exclaim. Yuan Jiming's expression was indifferent. This is only a small trick. It's nothing much. It can't wait for the grand hall. This old man has observed that your meridians are abnormally tough and wide. With this kind of talent, you should have stood out from the rest long ago. Even if you are in the 11th layer of qi refining now, it shouldn't be strange. Why is it that after you went through the elimination of the seedlings, you are still in the 10th layer of qi refining? Xiao Mao smiled apologetically. This disciple is slow-witted. Before the elimination of the seedlings, I was only in the 4th layer of qi refining. What? Qi refining? The 4th layer of qi refining? Yuan Jiming's body trembled. He had clearly just learned about the elimination of the seedlings from the sect master's order, so he was completely unaware of Xiao Mao's previous cultivation. Yes, this disciple was originally in the 4th layer of qi refining. It was only after the sect master's special training that I stepped into the 10th layer of qi refining. Xiao Mao said honestly. Yuan Jiming stared at Xiao Mao, as if he wanted to see into Xiao Mao's heart. After a while, he said in a low voice, "Xiao Mao, tell me everything in detail." Xiao Mao did not dare to refute. He recounted everything that he encountered in the ice cave and everything that could be explained in detail. The details of the cultivation method. Forgive this disciple for not being able to divulge. In the end, Xiao Mao said in a low voice. Yuan Jiming's face was calm, but his heart had long been set off by a monstrous wave. When Xiao Mao finished, he sighed and said, "Sect master is indeed unfathomable. My Xuanyan school actually has such a miraculous method. Sigh, if this method could be used, wouldn't my Xuanyan school be able to dominate the Dawn Rain continent?" Forget it, Xiao Mao. This old man already understands the sect master's intentions. You can cultivate in my cold mountain. Yuan Jiming waved his hand and said, "This old man wants to see, under my guidance, when will you be able to cultivate to the golden core stage?" Golden core? Xiao Mao stared blankly, then his face lit up with joy. He bowed and said in thanks, "Thank you, master." Yuan Jiming waved his hand, and the light barrier around Xiao Mao disappeared. The cold wind and icy rain came again, instantly drenching his already dry Taoist robe. Endure it for now. When you really can't endure it anymore, you can cultivate again. Remember, the longer you endure it, the greater your cultivation achievements will be. Yes, this disciple understands. Xiao Mao's lips were pale as he replied in a low voice. Yuan Jiming closed his eyes and ignored him, leaving Xiao Mao kneeling in the wind and rain, silently enduring it. Far to the west, in a valley filled with red flowers and green willows, water trickled down from a towering snowy mountain. After countless twists and turns, it flowed into a jade-green cold pond in the valley. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it. Chapter 1666. This was the extreme west of Huan country. The snowy peaks stretched endlessly. Although the sunlight was also strong, here, there was no longer the warmth of other places. There was only a deathly white, a cold desolation. Everything was white as far as the eye could see. There were no other colors. When the strong wind blew, the pure white snow on the snowy peaks was only blown up by the wind. The white snow had accumulated for countless years and had long been compacted. It was as hard as iron and stone. Even the strong wind couldn't move it. The cloudless sky was endless blue. It contrasted with the pure white of the snowy peaks, giving people a feeling of incomparable holiness. At the edge of the sky, blue and white met. They were clearly separated and were especially eye-catching. Above this seemingly tranquil snowy scene, two sword lights flashed through the sky. The originally brilliant sword lights seemed so small in this vast and boundless world. The two sword lights flashed past a few towering snowy peaks. With a turn, they plunged down and disappeared into the vast sea of snow. The place where the sword lights disappeared was the valley between two snowy peaks. This valley was very strange. It was similar to the other snowy peaks, all piled up with white snow. However, starting from the middle of the valley, there was an invisible formation that isolated everything inside the valley from the outside. The climate inside the valley was mild and humid. A field of red flowers and green willows covered the entire valley. On the two sides of the valley, there were streams of water that flowed slowly down the valley's stone walls. At the end of the stone walls was a deep, sparkling lake. The two sword lights flew above the deep lake. Above the deep lake, between the stone walls of the valley, there were many pavilions. There were even many palaces on the flat ground. These buildings, the rugged stone walls, and the green trees set off each other. If one didn't raise their head to look at the 10,000 years of snow on the towering snowy peaks, who could imagine that this was a place of extreme cold? The sword light receded, revealing two sword cultivators. One was a male cultivator in his 30s. He was tall, had long arms, a red face, and a pair of bright eyes. The other was a female cultivator. She was also in her 30s. She had a petite and exquisite figure. The lines on her body were clear. The heroic spirit between her eyebrows was not inferior to the male cultivator beside her. There was a green flying sword under the male cultivator's feet. When the male cultivator landed on the ground, it turned into a 4-inch-long sword and flew into his hand. It was like a small snake that swam around like it was sentient. Beneath the female cultivator was a pink sword that was as thick as a thumb. As the sword light converged, it turned into a flying swan that circled around the female cultivator a few times. Then, as the female cultivator opened her cherry lips slightly, it entered the female cultivator's body. The place where the two sword cultivators landed was a palace. The palace door appeared on the stone wall, and there were dozens of steps in front of the palace door. As for the other parts of the palace, they were buried in the stone wall. The two swordsmen raised their eyes to look at the swordsmen standing guard on both sides of the palace gate. They looked at each other. There was some anxiety in their eyes, but they did not appear to be panicked. Walking up the stone steps, an armored sword guard stepped forward, raised his hand and shouted, "Dazzling Sword Spirit Palace, please show your disciples sword token." The two sword cultivators clapped their hands and took out sword-shaped tokens that were the same as Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuha's. The sword guard took the tokens and checked them. He returned them to the two and cupped his fists. "Thank you for your hard work, seniors." The male cultivator took the sword token and nodded with a smile. "I don't dare." "Thank you for your hard work as well." Then he turned around and whispered, "Junior Marshal sister, let's go quickly." "Yes, Senior Marshal brother, please go first." The female cultivator replied and quickly followed behind the male cultivator. When the two figures disappeared into the shadow of the palace gate, the sword guard sighed inwardly. The sword guard beside him also frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Captain Song, the two seniors seem to be the teachers on duty at Shuiyu Mountain in the west?" Captain Song glanced at the sword guard and smiled. "Your cultivation level is not high, but your eyes are quite sharp. You can actually see the origins of the two seniors." The sword guard did not seem to be proud of being praised. His face was filled with panic as he whispered, "If they are the teachers on duty at Shuiyu Mountain? If they are back, then wouldn't million men at Meng Mountain? Sigh, that's exactly the case." Captain Song looked around and sighed again. However, his eyes then looked at the holy mountain in the distance, and a smile appeared on his face. "We sword cultivators were born to fight. I only hope that my 3 feet of green light will protect the peace of my sword domain." "Yes, as you wish, Captain." The sword guard's eyes were filled with pride as he raised his head to look. The 2 sword cultivators hurriedly entered the palace door. The interior of the palace door was spacious, and the fist-sized moonstones on the stone walls lit up the entire palace. The sword-shaped runes engraved on the stone walls could be seen clearly. "Greetings, martial uncle." The 2 sword cultivators passed through a heavy pavilion, and a few young sword cultivators came up to them. When they saw the 2 of them, they immediately hid to the side and cupped their fists respectfully. The male and female sword cultivators nodded slightly and walked past them with light steps. It was only after the 2 of them left that the young sword cultivators dared to take a step forward. After walking for about the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they arrived at a spacious palace. The ground of the palace had a huge sword-shaped stone engraving, and at the end of the stone engraving was another golden palace door. The 2 sword cultivators came to the center of the hall and stopped moving forward. They clapped their hands and the 2 sword tokens turned into 2 rays of sword light that flew into the closed door. Seeing the sword tokens disappear, the 2 bowed and said, "Shuiyu Mountain's disciples on duty, Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming, greet the sect master." Whooshed before the 2 of them finished speaking, a bright green sword light shot out from the palace door and stopped in front of the 2 of them. It turned into a huge sword that was 5 feet long. Immediately after, 2 more sword lights flew out from the huge sword. They were the sword tokens that the 2 of them had just flown in. The sword tokens landed in front of the 2 of them. "Wait a moment, I still have some things to do in the palace." An old voice came from the huge sword. "Yes, disciple understands." Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming respectfully replied. At the same time, their eyes lit up and they thought to themselves, "Sword transformation. I'm afraid Sect Master Ouyang has already refined a 3rd-grade sword transformation." After a while, the palace door in front of them flashed, and 5 sword lights shot out. These 5 sword lights had different colors and purity. One of them was similar to Sect Master Ouyang's sword light, which was fiery red. It also stopped behind the huge sword. The other 4 sword lights were slightly dimmer, and the outline of the flying sword also faded. Seeing this, Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming didn't dare to be negligent. They bowed again and said, "Vice Sect Master, Sword Masters." Without waiting for them to raise their heads, the 2 giant swords in front of them gradually turned illusory. 2 tall old cultivators with soaring sword intent appeared. They were Sect Master Ouyang Mingxiu and Vice Sect Master Zhang Yenzong of the Xinjian sect. As for the other 4 sword beams, they too stopped and 4 old cultivators, 1 male and 1 female, were revealed. Jianchong, Ming, why didn't you guard Shuiyu Mountain? Why did you suddenly return to the Sword Palace? Could it be that something has happened to millions of Meng Mountains? Ouyang Mingxiu asked. His voice contained the power of the golden chime, and it echoed in the hall, making people feel that it was very sharp. "Yes, Sect Master knows." "That's right." Chu Jianchong said respectfully. "A few months ago, a few disciples of the Xinjian sect suddenly disappeared while patrolling Meng Mountains. There was no news. I led many experts to search along the usual route, but nothing unusual happened. However, after the disciples patrolled, another disciple disappeared. So, Marshal Uncle Tang Hao temporarily stopped the routine patrolling, narrowed the scope of the patrolling, and sent more people to form teams." "What about the other sword sects?" After Chu Jianchong finished speaking, Vice Sect Master Zhang Yenzong asked. His voice also had the same golden chime, and there was a sharp sword intent that was difficult to suppress. Reporting to Vice Sect Master, Yang Ming opened his mouth and said, "The Bright Sword Sect, Lunar Sun Sword Sect, and Flame Bamboo Sword Sect are guarding the vicinity of my Xian Sword Sect. According to the news they sent, similar situations have also occurred. They have taken the same measures as my Xian sword sect. Are there any other abnormalities? Zhang Yanzong frowned slightly, turned to look at Ouyang Mingxiu, and asked again. Good to let you know, sect masters, the area that our Shenzhen sect is guarding has never been an important area. In the past few decades, the invasions of Million Mountain Meng Mountains were not initiated from this area. I have analyzed it in detail, and felt that this abnormality is too sudden. I'm afraid that Million Mountain Meng Mountains is probing. Chu Jianchong hesitated and said, Damn it, when did the barbarians learn how to probe? Zhang Yanzong cursed and scratched his bald head. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Ouyang Mingxiu shook her head slightly and said, Our Huan Country Sword sect has been fighting with Million Mountain Meng Mountains for many years. We know each other's methods. Although Million Mountain Meng Mountains people were enlightened late, but after so many years, they should have learned a few moves from us, right? Haha, Zhang Yanzong laughed and said, Unfortunately, Million Mountain Meng Mountains soul cultivators are too mysterious. If not, I would also want to cultivate. Cough cough, Ouyang Mingxiu coughed and said in a low voice, Junior brother, you are the Shenzhen sect's vice sect master, how can you say such things? Hee, aren't all the disciples of my Shenzhen sect here? Zhang Yanzong grinned and said, I'm just joking, just joking. What about Flying Feather sect and Quilted Mountain sect? Ouyang Mingxiu ignored Zhang Yanzong and turned to ask Chu Jianchong. Flying Feather sect was not a sword sect. Although they also cultivated sword origin, their natal artifact was not necessarily a flying sword. Quilted Mountain sect was similar to Shi Country's spirit husbandry sect. They used spirit beasts as companions and were considered beast cultivators. Hearing Ouyang Mingxiu's question, Chu Jianchong quickly said, Flying Feather sect hasn't made any moves, but Quilted Mountain sect's spirit beasts seem to be a little abnormal. However, they didn't say in detail, so Marshal Uncle Tang can't figure out the reason. Yes, the only thing we can do now is to send more people. Ouyang Mingxiu nodded and said, Stop them with silence. I'm afraid that's the only way. Zhang Yanzong stopped smiling and nodded in agreement. However, at this moment, a dark green sword light flew in from outside the palace. It was very fast and landed in front of Zhang Yanzong. Chapter 1667. A flying sword message? Zhang Yanzong was stunned. He didn't expect anyone to send him a flying sword message. He scolded, What are the guards doing? Cough, junior brother. Ouyang Mingxiu coughed twice and said, Which guard dares to intercept a flying sword message from the Shenzhen sect's vice sect master? Why don't you take a look at the content? Maybe it's related to Shuiyu Mountain? Hearing the sect master's words, Zhang Yanzong didn't dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand on the flying sword. Pa! A crisp sound was heard. A purple light flashed from the flying sword and a sword intent appeared. At the same time, a 1-foot mirror appeared in front of everyone. Zhang Yanzong was very familiar with the sword intent. He blurted out, Yuha? Then he hurriedly looked at the mirror in front of everyone. The mirror was a little blurry and the images inside were not very clear. However, Zhang Yutong, Zhang Yuha and Lu Weigong's images could still be seen. This? Zhang Yanzong's eyes widened. He pointed his hand and a sword energy rushed into the mirror. The entire mirror gradually became clear. Motherfucker, where did these two brats run off to? They actually dared to send a flying sword message for help? Zhang Yanzong retracted his hand and cursed. He was shocked again, Dao sect. These two little girls went to the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? Damn it, who doesn't know you two in the sword sects of Heng Country? Maybe they will take care of you. You ran to the 3 kingdoms of cultivation, who knows who you are? This is bad, this is bad. As Zhang Yanzong spoke, his whole body suddenly expanded. Then, a sword intent soared into the sky. With a flash of light, his body gradually became blurry as if he was going to turn into a giant sword. Vice Sect Master Zhang, don't worry. Ouyang Mingxiu saw this and quickly stopped him. Where are you going? Senior brother Ouyang, Yuha and Yutong are in trouble. Of course I'm going to save them, Zhang Yenzong said. His whole body had turned into a giant sword. A fiery sword light flashed and flew out of the sword palace. Sigh, junior brother, you're too reckless. With such a temperament, how can he be the vice sect leader of my Xian sword sect? Yangming pointed his finger, then a three-colored sword net suddenly appeared above the main hall, blocking in front of the sword light. Seeing that the way was blocked, Zhang Yenzong showed half of his figure and said angrily, Sovereign, what are you doing? Do you want to see Yutong and Yuhi die? Come back first. How long do you think it will take for you to fly to the nearest state of Shi? With my second-grade sword transformation art, I'm afraid that 100 days. As Zhang Yenzong spoke, he understood. He sighed and flew back to Ouyang Mingxi's side. He looked at the motionless mirror not far away and remained silent. Vice sect leader Zhang. Ouyang Mingxiu glanced at him and said, You have to remember that you are the vice sect leader of the Shenzhen sect. You can't be compared to others. You have to be calm and steady. Acting so recklessly is not only inconsistent with your position as the vice sect leader, it's also inconsistent with your age and cultivation base. My position as vice sect leader was originally... Zhang Yenzong had just finished his sentence when he saw the stern look in Yangming's eyes. He quickly stopped himself and bowed. I was reckless. If it's a matter of the sect, I can still stay calm. But Yutong and Yuhi are my sweetheart. That Yuhi has the same temperament as me. Seeing them in trouble, I can't help it. Even if you can't help it, you have to endure it. Yangming said, the position of vice sect leader was appointed by the previous sect leader. He knows that you are muddle-headed in small matters and detached from important matters. That's why he appointed you as the vice sect leader. Otherwise, with your recklessness, I understand. Zhang Yenzong calmed down and bowed. The image of Yuhi's flying sword message has begun to dissipate. It's obvious that they are in trouble far away from the state of Shi. If it's not in the east of the state of Shi, it's in the other two countries. Even if I go now, it'll be too late. You only know now? Yangming said bluntly, the sword masters present, as well as Jianchong and Mingyu, know about it already, right? Sect leader, we admire vice sect leader for maintaining such a pure heart. This is where the purity of vice sect leader's sword spirit lies. Chu Jianchong quickly bowed and said, besides, it's related to our own blood relatives. No one can stay calm. Thief. Zhang Yenzong wiped his bald forehead with his big hand and grinned slightly. Swordsman, quickly summoned Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao to the sword palace. Yangming rolled her eyes at Zhang Yenzong, who was extremely loyal to her, and said loudly. Then she asked, Junior brother, why did Yutong and Yuhi go to the Three Kingdoms? How would I know? Zhang Yenzong had just lowered his big hand, but now he raised it again. He scratched his head bitterly and said, This? I'm afraid I'll have to ask their master? Sigh, ever since their parents died in Shuiyu Mountain, they have been wanting to improve their cultivation as soon as possible. I remember now. They went to look for the mysterious Yin spiritual herb. Mysterious Yin spiritual herb? Yangming was stunned, and then her face turned gloomy. The mysterious Yin spiritual herb grows in the mysterious Yin illusory realm. Can they go there with their cultivation? Sigh. Zhang Yenzong sighed and said, Yutong and Yuhi want to cultivate the great Yin-Yang six-direction sword spirit. What? Great Yin-Yang six-direction sword spirit? Not only did Ouyang Mingxiu's face darken, even the other 5 sword masters, who had been keeping their mouths shut, exclaimed in surprise. Yang Ming even blurted out, This is a sword spirit that no one in my Shenzhen sect has been able to cultivate for countless years. It's not too difficult to cultivate the great Yin-Yang six-directions sword spirit, but the requirements are too high. It requires 2 people with the extreme Yang constitution and the extreme Yin constitution to cultivate together. Moreover, their minds must be connected and their realms must be the same. Only then can the growth of the 2 sword spirits progress together. Although Yutong and Yuhi's physiques lean towards Yin and Yang respectively, they don't meet the cultivation requirements. Yangming said softly. Yes, that's what I told them too. Zhang Yenzong smiled bitterly. At that time, they agreed and said that they had given up on this idea. But half a year later, Yuhi suddenly asked how to cultivate to the extreme Yin level if one's physique leans towards Yin. I didn't pay much attention to it and casually mentioned a few spiritual herbs that could improve one's physique. Of course, the easiest one to obtain was the mysterious Yin spiritual herb. Sai, junior brother, the mysterious Yin spiritual herb is one thing, but solitary Yin is not common. Just the mysterious Yin spiritual herb alone can't improve one's physique to the extreme Yin level. Yangming shook her head and said. Zhang Yenzong nodded. I know that, but the other thing is too difficult. I was just saying it casually. Who knew that the two of them really went? Since you know why they went, that's good. The two of them should have gone to the Tai Ching sect in Lian country. After all, that's the closest to the mysterious Yin illusory land. Moreover, with Yu Tong's steady personality, she wouldn't enter the mysterious Yin illusory land rashly. The two of them must have thought of a way from the Tai Ching sect. Yangming nodded and said. A female sword master spoke in a low voice. Sect master, you're right. Yu He is impatient, but Yu Tong is steady. Moreover, it's very likely that the Tai Ching sect has dark Yin spirit herbs. So, I presume that we'll be able to exchange for those things that our sword sect doesn't need. I just don't know whether Yu He and Yu Tong met this cultivator on the way there or on the way back. Another male sword master looked at the mirror and said, no matter where, how can our sword sect disciples be bullied by the Dao sect disciples? Yang Mingxiu sneered and said, look at how a disciple from the Dao sect is facing two disciples from the sword sect who are in the bright sword stage. I'm afraid that he's also in the late stage of the foundation establishment stage or the golden core stage. How can a senior bully the weak like this? Although our Xianjian sect isn't one of the top sects in Huan country, we definitely won't let them bully us. The Dao sect probably hasn't seen the power of our sword sect for many years and has long forgotten the lessons of the past. Vice sect Master Zhang, don't be anxious. We'll send 2 people to take a look. If they can deal with it properly, then it'll be good. Otherwise, if someone dares to provoke a battle between sword and Dao, our sword sect will definitely not take a step back. As he spoke, the uncontrollable sword intent suddenly surged up, directly passing through the layers of barriers and piercing into the azure sky. That aura was definitely not inferior to that of a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator. At the same time, the sword origin around everyone present surged uncontrollably. Everyone's sword intent was triggered and instantly, the entire sword palace was filled with sword intent. Even the sword-shaped runes engraved on the stone walls let out a clanging sound. A short while passed before the entire sword palace calmed down, and then a thin and tall sword cultivator with bright eyes and slanted brows walked briskly into the sword palace. Behind him was an extremely tall woman with a graceful figure. The woman had delicate features and revealed a heroic aura. She was like an unsheathed sharp sword. Disciples Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao greet sect master, vice sect master, and sword masters. After the 2 of them came forward to greet them, Yang Mingxiu pointed with his hand and said, Yuming, Shuyao, the 2 of you have the highest cultivation in our Xian sword sect. We value the 2 of you the most. The 2 of you should take a look at Yu Tong and Yuha's flying sword message. Yes, disciple understands. After the 2 of them replied, they looked up for a while and exchanged glances. Duan Yuming said, disciple has already seen it. Yu Tong and Yuha have encountered danger in the cultivation 3 kingdoms. Looking at the image, the surroundings are not clear. They must have been surrounded by a formation. After Duan Yuming said some things, Yang Mingxiu smiled and nodded. He waved his hand and a sword-shaped token flew into his hand. He instructed, this is the Xian Sword Sect Master's token. Take it. You and Shuyao will set off immediately and go to Meng Country's Tai Ching sect or the mysterious Yin Illusion realm to find traces of the 2 of them. The 2 of them are probably looking for the mysterious Yin spiritual grass. Chapter 1668. Yes, I understand. Duan Yuming kept the sect leader's token and said loudly, "I will not disappoint, sect leader. I will find you he and you Tong with my iron blood." Ouyang Mingxiu nodded and smiled. "You are at the second grade of the illusory sword realm, which is equivalent to the middle stage of the golden core realm. In terms of fighting, you won't lose to the late stage of the golden core realm. The other sects will listen to your words. Make a copy of this flying sword message and bring it with you. With this, even if they are under the Immortal Alliance, they will have nothing to say. Make them obediently hand over my 2 girls. Even if the Taiqing sect doesn't know, we must help them find the 2 girls. Otherwise, the Shenzhen sect will attack the country of Shi and the Taiqing sect." Zhang Yanzong shouted. Vice sect leader Zhang's words are a bit overboard. However, you 2 must pass this message to the Taiqing sect in the Meng country. If anything happens to the 2 girls, the Shenzhen sect? No, the sword cultivators of the Huan country will not let this go. Ouyang Mingxiu didn't mind Zhang Yanzong stealing his words. He coldly repeated his words to Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao. "Yes, we understand." Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao's expression turned serious. They waved their hands and left the flying sword message image. They bowed and said, "We will not disappoint you. Go, I will wait for your good news in the Sword Palace." Ouyang Mingxiu nodded. Duan Yuming opened his mouth and spat out a sword light. The sword light was like a flying fish, and it circled around Duan Yuming for a while before it exploded. The sword light turned into hundreds of sword lights, and each sword light took the shape of a swimming fish. They swam back and forth like a school of swimming fish, drowning Duan Yuming. After that, Duan Yuming gradually left the ground and flew out of the palace along with the school of fish formed by the sword lights. At the same time, Wang Shuyao's cherry lips parted slightly, and a rainbow-colored ray of light flew out. That ray of light was like a rainbow, and it surrounded Wang Shuyao's graceful body. As Duan Yuming's body flew up, the rainbow-colored ray of light turned into a rainbow and chased after the flying fish, leaving on its own. Before Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao's swimming fish sword and rainbow sword could fly out of the main hall, another flying sword message came in. At this moment, the sword guard's voice sounded, reporting to the sect master, "A flying sword message from Shuiyu Mountain has arrived." Ouyang Mingxiu nodded and pointed with her finger. The messenger flying sword flew into the air and stopped. An old voice was heard. It was Tang Hao, who was guarding Shuiyu Mountain, reporting to sect leader, "I have found one of the disciples who went missing. However, this child was already delirious. Looking at the situation, he should have been subjected to a soul-searching technique. As for why this is the case, I have yet to find the reason." Soul search technique. When Tang Hao's voice disappeared, Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming's faces were filled with shock. They looked at each other and fell into deep thought. The sect leader of the Xian Sword sect, Ouyang Mingxiu, also had a fierce look in her eyes. She looked at the flying sword message in the air with an indescribable expression on her face. Far away in the country of Shi, there was also a towering mountain peak. It was also a beautiful valley in spring. A snow-white waterfall hung on the mountain wall, and the loud sound of the waterfall was deafening. It covered the entire valley. The waterfall fell into a deep pool in the valley, and countless bubbles appeared from the depths of the pool, causing the water to splash in all directions. This deep pool was very deep, but it didn't look very big. There was a gap in the pool, and the water flowed down a few dozen feet into another pool. This pool was very big, but it was also very quiet. A large amount of water flowed in, but it didn't cause any ripples. This pool was surrounded by peach trees. The peach trees were either pink, snow white, or bright red. The pool was covered in peach blossoms. From time to time, a breeze would blow by, and countless peach blossoms would fall into the pool. The peach blossoms would float for a moment, and then sink to the bottom of the pool, never to be seen again. Under the cover of the peach blossoms, there was a cave dwelling at the end of the valley. At this moment, the cave dwelling's door was tightly shut. Fairy Hong Xia, who was dressed in red, was kneeling in front of the cave dwelling. Fairy Hong Xia had been kneeling here for more than 10 days and nights. The cave dwelling's door had always been tightly shut. She didn't dare to move. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her expression was calm. It was as if she had no regrets. With a sound, the cave dwelling's door opened. It made the same sound as the wooden door. A female cultivator who looked to be in her 50s walked out slowly with the same cold expression. Fairy Hong Xia opened her eyes and looked at the female cultivator's face without a single wrinkle. She whispered, "Master?" "Umph." The female cultivator snorted and scolded, "You still have the face to call me master. What did you say before you left that day? You definitely won't take off the spirit accumulation talisman. You must cultivate it to the Great Circle. Now, the Feather Immortal Assembly's competition is over. Not only did you confront your own senior brother for a disciple from another sect, you even took off the spirit accumulation talisman. Do you still have any respect for your master?" Fairy Hong Xia bit her lips and didn't say anything else. However, her gaze was still fixed on the female cultivator. "It seems like you don't have any intention of repentance for the past 10 days. The female cultivator squinted her eyes. She pointed her finger, and a spell was cast on Fairy Hong Xia's body. Within her meridians, limbs, and bones, endless soreness and pain burst forth. Fairy Hong Xia couldn't help but scream. However, it was only a sudden scream, and then there was no more sound. Immediately, Fairy Hong Xia rolled on the ground. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her nails had already pierced into her palms, and fresh blood flowed out. At the same time, between her tightly clenched teeth, traces of blood seeped out. Seeing that her clean red clothes were messy and dirty, the female cultivator waved her hand and cast a spell. Fairy Hong Xia's stiff body gradually softened, and the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from her mouth and nose. After a while, Fairy Hong Xia recovered. She tidied her clothes and knelt down. The female cultivator said coldly, "When you became my disciple that day, I already told you clearly. Our cultivation is the most heaven-defying thing. It's harder than sailing against the current. We can't be lazy. Furthermore, emotions are the most disturbing thing. Once you're tainted by them, you won't get any benefits. That day, you repeatedly promised this old woman and even swore a heavy oath. Only then did this old woman believe you. Otherwise, even if you were also from the Kai family, I would never have accepted you. For the past few years, you have ignored the male disciples of the Huanhua sect. Even that bastard Yun Jiechong, you treated him coldly. I was very pleased. However, I didn't expect that everything would change after I went to the Feather Immortal gathering. Let me ask you, is that disciple called Xiao Hua an old acquaintance of yours?" "Yes, I was acquainted with him." Fairy Hong Xia knew that she couldn't hide the truth, so she told her everything. A level 4 Qi refining itinerant cultivator returned Kai Zhuoxia's corpse and even gave you the last good fate token of the Huanhua sect? The female cultivator sneered, "I heard that this bastard is now at the beginning of level 12 Qi refining. He even had the strength to defeat Yun Jiechong. Do you think he was only at level 4 Qi refining that day? He was cheated and sold, and he even helped him count the spiritual stones. Why don't you think about it? If he was only a level 4 Qi refining itinerant cultivator, why would he give you the good fate token? Besides, look, hasn't he already joined the Imperial Thunder sect? If he didn't have the confidence to join the Imperial Thunder sect, do you think he would have given you the good fate token?" Fairy Hong Xia bit her lips and didn't answer. In fact, she understood very well. Others might not know, but she was the same as Kai Zhuoxia. She had practiced the sky-stealing sun-swapping technique since she was young. She was very sensitive to cultivation realms, especially when Xiao Hua was at level 4 Qi refining after that day. He was much weaker than her level 10 Qi refining. Fairy Hong Xia understood with a single glance. At this moment, when she thought of Xiao Hua's incomparably pure eyes, her heart felt peaceful. She believed that Xiao Hua would never lie to her. "You have nothing to say?" The female cultivator sneered, "You attacked a disciple of our sect without permission during the Feather Immortal gathering. According to the sect rules, you will be severely punished. If you regret it, I can give you some advice. Perhaps your punishment will be reduced." "You don't regret it?" Fairy Hong Xia said in a low voice without hesitation. "You really don't regret it?" A ripple appeared on the female cultivator's face. She asked curiously, I'm curious as to why you don't regret it. All right, teacher knows that Xiao Hua had returned elder sister's corpse and everything else. Didn't you return his favor by giving him some cultivation method? That was your promise. I have to return it. Fairy Hong Xia said resolutely, but I still feel that I owe him a favor. The sword embryo of the Feather Immortal Gathering is a good opportunity. If I don't return it now, when will I? The female cultivator's expression softened. She nodded and said, that's a good reason. However, Fairy Hong Xia continued, furthermore, even though I have only spent a short amount of time with him, but, Master, there are some people that even if you were to spend your entire life with them, you would still not develop any feelings for them. But for that person, you only need to look at him once to feel his heart, to feel his pain, and to know that he is the one you have been waiting for all your life. This feeling, I can't describe it with words. Besides, Xiao Hua is now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. If I don't do something, I'm afraid. You're afraid that other female cultivators will snatch him away? That he can't dual cultivate with you? The female cultivator was stunned for a moment before she sneered. That's what I'm thinking. Of course, I have to say it in front of you. But if it's someone else, I will only say that I want to return Xiao Hua's favor. Fairy Hong Xia said in a low voice. You're the smart one. Everyone else is a fool. The female cultivator cursed angrily, but then she looked up at the endless peach blossoms in the distance and sighed. I accepted you as my disciple because I wanted you to succeed in your cultivation. I won't let you take the wrong path. As for my story, as a disciple of the Kai clan, I'm sure you know about it, right? Fairy Hong Xia hesitated for a moment before she said in a low voice, Master, are you talking about Shang Huaming? Chapter 1669. Even after hearing the name Shang Huaming, the female cultivator's expression remained cold. She snorted and said, even you, a disciple of the Kai family of Liang, know about my past. It seems that I have quite a reputation in the Kai family. Fairy Hong Xia heard this and quickly said, Master, the name of Kai Qin is not what you want. You are a golden core stage cultivator, the pride of the Kai family. This golden core stage cultivator of the Huanhua sect, who was also Fairy Hong Xia's master, was also a member of the Kai family. Her name was Kai Qin. My actions are in accordance with the Great Tao. Why would I care about what others say? Kai Qin sneered. I have told you that if not for your good aptitude, I would not have taken you in, even if you were a disciple of the Kai family. I know. Fairy Hong Xia lowered her head and said, Since you know about my relationship with Shang Huaming, you must know what happened, right? Yes, I know. Fairy Hong Xia raised her head slightly, her jade-like face carrying a trace of admiration. Back then, for Shang Huaming's Xiao Yuehong, Master disregarded the clan leader's objections and broke out of the clan to marry Shang Huaming. After that, Xiao Yuehong became Shang Huaming's sect leader, and Master became Shang Huaming's sect leader's wife. A cold light flashed in Kai Qin's eyes and she said angrily, Girl, is this what I asked you? Fairy Hong Xia's delicate body trembled and she said softly, Yes, but after Master went to Shang Huaming, her cultivation had been hovering in the middle stage of foundation establishment. Later, when Master was traveling in the Xiaoyu continent, she had an epiphany of the Tao of cultivation. Following that, she had the opportunity to join the Huanhua sect. In less than 100 years, she had cultivated from foundation establishment to golden core stage. So you do know about this. Kai Qin's face turned cold and she scolded, I was childish back then. I was trapped by love and rebelled against the family. Later on, my cultivation improved on Yellow Flower Ridge, but it was not the right path. How could I become a great person? Love has always been the enemy of cultivation. If I had not broken free from Shang Huaming's mundane affairs and cut off my love, how could I have achieved what I have today? This old woman's lesson is still vivid in my mind. Why do you insist on following this old woman's path? As she spoke, Kai Qin's face turned green as she pointed her finger once more. Fairy Hong Xia cried out in pain as she crawled on the ground once more, rolling around in pain. Who is it? At this moment, Kai Qin raised her head and coldly shouted at the sky outside the valley. Martial Uncle Kai, Junior Jiang Lihan greets Martial Uncle Kai. A voice came from outside the valley. Kai Qin snorted coldly. With a wave of her hand, she removed the restrictive spell on Fairy Hong Xia and scolded, Yun Jiechong's master is here. Look at the trouble you have caused me. Kneel at the side. Yes, your disciple understands. Fairy Hong Xia did not dare to say anything else as she continued to kneel on the ground. Then, Kai Qin waved her white sleeves and a ray of light hit the sky outside the valley. With a soft sound, it seemed that some restrictive spells had been opened and 2 foundation establishment stage cultivators descended from the sky. The person in front was in the late stage of foundation establishment stage. He was dressed in green and was short in stature. The 2 tufts of beard at the corners of his mouth were very obvious, like the tail of a mouse. This person's face was dry and he looked even more bitter. Compared to Yun Jiechong, who was in the early stage of foundation establishment stage, he was like heaven and earth. However, this cultivator held his head high while Yun Jiechong lowered his head. Even though he was much taller than this cultivator, he still lowered his head and appeared to be very respectful. Jiang Lihan, you have never been to my Peach Blossom Valley. What brings you here today? Kai Qin did not go to greet them. She just stood there quietly and waited for the 2 to come closer before she asked. Martial Uncle, this Peach Blossom Valley is your place of meditation. Everyone in the Huanhua sect knows that Martial Uncle pursues the way of the heavens. If not for something important, I would not dare to disturb Martial Uncle's meditation. Jiang Lihan lowered her voice and bowed. Then she turned her head and said, Yun Jiechong, come and greet Martial Uncle Kai Qin. Junior Yun Jiechong greets Martial Uncle Kai. Yun Jiechong did not dare to be negligent. He tidied up his clothes and stopped looking at Fairy Hong Xia. He then bowed respectfully. Get up. Kai Qin flicked her sleeves and said, now you are also a foundation establishment stage cultivator. You are considered to have stepped into the door of cultivation. You are so young. I still have to congratulate you. I dare not. I am still far from junior sister Kai. This is all thanks to Martial Uncle Kai's guidance. Yun Jiechong said in a low voice. Kai Qin turned her head and looked at Fairy Hong Xia, who was kneeling with her back facing her. She said, this girl is too stubborn. I am just punishing her. Even though she has the cultivation, she does not have the state of mind. She has taken the wrong path. How can she achieve great things? Yun Jiechong looked at his master and smiled apologetically. Junior sister was just confused for a moment. She must have her difficulties. Otherwise, she would not have done such a thing. Kai Qin nodded. You are indeed a foundation establishment stage disciple. You are very knowledgeable. Then, she changed her tone and asked, may I know why you have come to the Peach Blossom Valley today? Jiang Lihan took a step forward and clapped her hands. She took out a token and handed it to Kai Qin. She smiled and said, I have received the order from the sect leader to discuss something with Senior Kai. Kai Qin did not take the token. She only scanned it with her spiritual will and nodded. Go ahead. Jiang Lihan seemed to know Kai Qin's temper. She kept the sect leader's token and looked at Fairy Hong Xia. She said, what Martial Uncle Kai's disciple did at the Feather Immortal meet today. Perhaps she had her difficulties. However, she really destroyed the momentum of our Huanhua sect. Our Huanhua sect's disciple could have won the Feather Immortal meet and obtained the extraterrestrial divine item. However, because of her, the Imperial Thunder sect gained the upper hand. Not only did she destroy the prestige of our Huanhua sect's disciple, but she also made our Huanhua sect a laughingstock. The sect leader has ordered that if we do not punish her severely, we will not be able to convince the public. We will not be able to set the rules of the Huanhua sect. Kai Qin frowned and said coldly, how does the sect leader intend to deal with her? Are you going to expel her from the Huanhua sect? Are you going to abolish her cultivation? Of course not. Jiang Lihan smiled apologetically. Your disciple is very talented. After she entered the Huanhua sect with the good fate token, she reached the foundation establishment stage within a few years. Moreover, she has completed the Qi refinement stage. How can we abandon such a good disciple so easily? The sect leader has ordered that she is to go into seclusion in the Valley of Ice and reflect on her mistakes for 20 years. Hiss. Hearing this, Kai Qin sucked in a breath of cold air. The astral winds from the frozen ice valley were bone-chilling. Not to mention 20 years, even a single day and night could turn a person into ice. The sect leader actually wants to punish Fairy Hong Xia to go into seclusion in the Valley of Ice. She must be really angry. Fairy Hong Xia, who was kneeling behind Kai Qin, also turned pale when she heard this. Humph, I haven't even met the sect leader yet, and you've already brought the sect leader's order. This is really timely. Kai Qin sneered. I'll bring my disciple to meet the sect leader now. Martial Ant, don't be anxious. Jiang Lihan quickly said. The sect leader has ordered that this order will not be changed. You? Kai Qin was furious when she heard this. Martial Ant, don't be anxious. Jiang Lihan seemed to have a card up her sleeve. She smiled and said, I haven't finished relaying the sect leader's order. Speak. Kai Qin said angrily. The sect leader has ordered that Kai Hongxia made a mistake first and should be punished severely. However, Kai Hongxia's talent is very good and she is an elite disciple of the Huanhua sect. We must consider her future. Considering that she is young and ignorant and also has Yun Guichong's protection, the affection is commendable. In view of this, Yun Guichong and Kai Hongxia are to become a pair of dual cultivators. Firstly, both of them can encourage each other and achieve great Dao together. Secondly, we can eliminate the Huanhua sect from being a laughingstock in front of other sects. What? Kai Qin was stunned when she heard this. She had never thought that the sect leader would punish her in this way. At the same time, Fairy Hong Xia's eyes narrowed. Although she did not say anything, endless thoughts arose in her heart. Yun Guichong bowed and said, I've admired Junior Martial Sister Hongxia's character for a long time, and I've always treated Junior Martial Sister as my ideal partner for dual cultivation. However, I was afraid of delaying Junior Martial Sister's cultivation. Even if I could build my foundation, I wouldn't dare to disturb her. I don't know why I dared to tell Martial Ant in advance. Fortunately, the sect leader empathized with my painstaking efforts and took this opportunity to eliminate the bad influence that Junior Sister has caused in the Feather Immortal Assembly. These were all suggested by the sect leader. I have never dared to use these to threaten Martial Ant and Junior Sister. Seeing how gentle and elegant Yun Guichong was, even Kai Qin was moved. At this moment, she had thought about many things. The sect leader's decision was appropriate. He could not only avoid Kai Hongxia's punishment but also eliminate the bad influence. If news of this spread, the disciples of other sects would also know that Fairy Hong Xia of the Huanhua sect did not hesitate to fall out with her lover in order to return the favor of the Imperial Thunder sect's disciple. Such a character was rare in the cultivation world. But Kai Qin naturally thought of what Fairy Hong Xia had said and said to herself, Sigh, this girl's character? I'm afraid it's not very possible. Immediately, Kai Qin turned her head and said, Hong Xia, you've heard the sect leader's order. Do you have a choice? Martial Ant, you don't have to be so busy. Yun Guichong hurriedly said with a smile, the sect leader has given Junior Sister 10 days to consider. It's not too late to wait until Junior Sister has thought it through. There's no need. Although Fairy Hong Xia was kneeling, her voice was still cold. Why do I need 10 days to consider such a thing? I'll give you an answer now. I will enter the Valley of Ice tomorrow. Junior Sister. Yun Guichong said anxiously, the Valley of Ice is not a good place to be. You have to think carefully. Once you enter, you will either die or be injured. Dao, cultivation, it's all for naught. Fairy Hong Xia's back was facing Yun Guichong. Her voice was unusually firm. It's just the astral winds from the sky. Even if I die, I will walk my own path. I will never do anything that I don't want to do. Junior Sister, why do you have to do this? Yun Guicheng's face was pale, and his eyes were filled with a strange expression. He had not expected Fairy Hong Xia to be so heartless to him. Xiaohua, it must be Xiaohua. Yun Guicheng's face was expressionless, but his heart was filled with malevolence. Chapter 1670. After sending off Jiang Lihan and Yun Jicheng, Kai Qin watched as Yun Jicheng's figure disappeared into the air. Without turning back, she said coldly, "So you've decided? If so, why did you do it in the first place?" "Master, a person should have a belief. If I didn't have this belief, I would have been a disciple. Since I have this belief, then I'll carry it out to the end." Since Fairy Hong Xia had decided, she naturally said calmly, "If so, then I'll do it in the first place." "Hee, what a pity, what a joke." Kai Qin sneered, "Wasn't it the same when I rebelled against the Kai family? At that time, Xiao Hongyue, who killed Hua Ming, naturally knew about it. But what could he do in the future when I couldn't improve my cultivation? Wouldn't he still be helpless? And you're even better. You made this decision far away from the Imperial Thunder sect. Your punishment will definitely not spread to the Huanhua sect. That little bastard Xiaohua. I'm afraid he won't know about it for 20 years. 20 years. Even though there's no concept of time in cultivation, the world changes too quickly. How can you know the changes in other people's minds? Even if you went through a near-death experience, how can Xiaohua know about your suffering after coming out of the cold wind valley?" Fairy Hong Xia bit her lips and stared at the ground, not saying a word. "Even though you don't like Yun Jicheng, since things have come to this, I think you should agree for now. Drag it out one day at a time." "No, master, I won't compromise." Fairy Hong Xia flatly refused. A rare look of pity flashed through Kai Qin's eyes, but it was immediately replaced by coldness. "This old woman will ask you one last time. Everything you've experienced is what this old woman has experienced. Everything you're saying now is what this old woman has said to the patriarch before. This old woman's example will be your teacher for the future. The detours I've taken will be what you'll have to face in the future. Moreover, your situation is even more serious. The cold wind valley, even I don't dare to enter it easily. Your near-death experience is considered light. Now that things had come to this, how could Fairy Hong Xia not hesitate? If one were to talk about what she had done in the bright realm of the Taiqing sect, it was true that she had feelings for Xiaohua Qing. But on the surface, it could also be understood as returning Xiaohua's favor. After all, she had said those words through telepathy, and no one else knew about it. But what about Xiaohua's thoughts? Xiaohua didn't say anything. Fairy Hong Xia's cleverness was to use an ambiguous attitude to make her intentions clear to Xiaohua in front of everyone. Just as she said, if she didn't make it clear in the Hao realm, she really didn't know when she would be able to make it clear. Moreover, even if Xiaohua had other thoughts, she naturally had a reason to explain it. However, it was precisely this kind of petty cleverness that caused her to fall into another embarrassing situation. Xiaohua didn't make it clear to her, and Fairy Hong Xia leisurely flew away to build her foundation. Xiaohua didn't even have time to say a single word. Fairy Hong Xia had expected the punishment from the Cleansing Flower sect, but she never expected it to be so severe. Of course, this was just a pretense. The real intention of the head of Huanhua sect was to let her practice dual cultivation with Yun Guicheng to eliminate the sect's laughingstock. What should I do? What should I do? Fairy Hong Xia hesitated at this crucial moment. At this moment, in the Kai family of Liang, Xiaohua's low cultivation level, clear eyes, and the calm expression he had when he handed over the storage bag to her surfaced in Fairy Hong Xia's mind. That's right, when a level 4 Qi refining rogue cultivator faced that storage bag, it was like a beggar seeing a mountain of gold. He was actually able to keep his promise. Keeping her promise, it was easy to say, but how difficult was it to do? Especially when it came to fulfilling the promise of a dead person. This kind of person isn't worth my effort? Fairy Hong Xia asked herself, won't this kind of person have a bright future? Will this kind of person ignore everything I've done for him? A few rhetorical questions emerged from the bottom of her heart, and Fairy Hong Xia had a plan in mind. However, Cold Wind Valley. That's right, Fairy Hong Xia suddenly remembered Kai Qin's persuasion just now. Her tone seemed to be very strict at the start, but later on, she seemed to have loosened up. This final question actually had the intention of sounding her out. Taking a deep breath, Fairy Hong Xia said indifferently, "Master, this disciple has made up her mind. As a disciple of the Kai family, I will never regret my own choices. Even if this disciple's soul is blown away by the astral winds, I will never give in to the threats of others." Although Fairy Hong Xia's tone was indifferent, it was resolute and without hesitation. Hearing this, Kai Qin's eyes flashed. Don't be stubborn. I'll return to the residence to cultivate. I'll give you 2 days. If you regret it, it won't be too late to look for me." Kai Qin did not say anything else and flew into the cave. Fairy Hong Xia knelt in front of the cave for another 2 days. When Kai Qin came out again, Fairy Hong Xia was still willing to enter Cold Wind Valley. "Sai, forget it. The stubbornness in the blood of the Kai family is not something that can be easily changed." Kai Qin stared at Fairy Hong Xia for a long time and sighed. She clapped her hands and took out a simple phoenix hairpin from her storage bag. With a swing of her hand, she flew to Fairy Hong Xia and whispered, "Take a look." Fairy Hong Xia furrowed her brows when she heard her master's voice transmission. However, she felt a sense of relief in her heart. She immersed her spirit sense into it and her expression changed drastically. She blurted out, "Ice Phoenix Cultivation Method?" Kai Qin waved her hand and a ray of light flashed past. A sound barrier was activated and sealed Fairy Hong Xia's voice. "You're already a foundation establishment cultivator and you still don't know your place? I've thought highly of you for nothing. This disciple is too shocked. Please forgive me, Master." Fairy Hong Xia's eyes turned quickly and she whispered back, "This disciple has never thought that my Kai family's legendary mental cultivation method would be seen here. How can my Kai family be compared to an ordinary cultivation family? I don't want to tell you these things now. If fate brings us together, you'll know in the future." Kai Qin sneered, "Use a few days to memorize this Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method. If there's anything you don't understand, ask me. This Cold Wind Valley is a place of death for others. For my Kai family's disciples? That might not be the case. Since you've chosen this path and you're of my Kai family's bloodline, then this old one can only let you try. If you succeed, Tsk, not to mention Jin Dan, even Yuaning." "Master?" Fairy Hong Xia's face lit up with joy. "Don't be happy too early," Kai Qin said coldly. "This old one is only saying that it's possible. The possibility is extremely small. For so many years, no one in my Kai family has been able to awaken the thing in their bloodline. Even this old one can't do it. For you, there's only one possibility. If you don't succeed, only death awaits you. This disciple understands." Fairy Hong Xia retracted her joy and nodded. "Why is this Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method incomplete?" Fairy Hong Xia frowned after looking at it for a while. Silly girl. What kind of mental cultivation method is the Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method? How would you know? Wait until you've mastered it and save your life. When you have the chance, you can go to the Kai family's ancestral land to search for it." Kai Qin said with a rare smile. "Kai family's ancestral land?" Fairy Hong Xia asked curiously, "How would this disciple not know?" What's the difference between knowing now and knowing in the future? If you can't get out of Cold Wind Valley, what's the use of knowing so much?" Kai Qin said bluntly. "This disciple understands. This disciple will never reveal it." Fairy Hong Xia's expression turned cold as she transmitted her voice. "You're on your own now." With a wave of her hand, Kai Qin cast a few spells and set up a restriction around Fairy Hong Xia. She then flew into the cave, leaving Fairy Hong Xia to comprehend the Kai family's Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method. In a quiet little mountain village, there weren't many villagers in the village. Every one of them looked simple and honest. In a small courtyard in the mountain village, A beautiful woman dressed in ordinary village clothes sat on a crooked bamboo chair with a cold expression. This woman was Zhang Yutong. However, Zhang Yutong's cultivation was sealed at this time. Apart from her threatening temperament and plain clothes, no one could tell that she was a sword cultivator. In front of her was Zhang Qingxiao dressed in camouflage. May I ask this sect leader, which sect are you from? Which sect is this? Zhang Yutong looked at the mysterious cultivator in front of her and couldn't help but ask. Do you think this old man will answer you? Zhang Qingxiao smiled and said, You just stay here obediently and this old man won't do anything to you? You must be from the devil realm. Zhang Yutong suddenly said. Zhang Qingxiao was not surprised and said with a smile, Smart people don't live long. Miss Zhang, this old man advises you, it's better if you haven't seen anything. Haven't seen anything? You don't seem to understand us sword cultivators. Zhang Yutong sneered, If you're not from the devil realm, then you're a devil cultivator. You used your identity as a devil cultivator to kidnap Ayin. You used the identity of a Dao sect to do things. Why do you think I can't guess? Then tell me, what is this old man's plan? Zhang Qingxiao was interested and asked with a smile. Of course it's to provoke the conflict between us sword cultivators and the Dao sect. Let us fight each other and you devil cultivators will reap the benefits. Zhang Yutong hit the nail on the head. Zhang Qingxiao pondered for a moment and nodded slightly. Miss Zhang's idea is similar to this old man's plan. Do you think we sword cultivators are brainless people? That will leave our nest for a small girl like me? What if we have the image of the flying sword message and your sister's statement? Plus we haven't heard from Miss Zhang for many years? Zhang Qingxiao smiled and said, Even if others don't care, what will Miss Zhang's twin sister do? After she does something, how will the Changbai sect or Tai Ching sect react? If these two sects move, what will the sword cultivators do? Zhang Yutong knew that this was just speculation and a possibility, but she really didn't know what would happen in the future. Who would think that she would be kidnapped by a devil cultivator? That you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.